because again, killing people at the grocery store is not productive.
Well, we also talked about slaughterhouse workers. We talked about
they're entrenched in a system of oppression. But it's fun to talk about these hypotheticals. Sure, I mean, okay, fine, kill all the people that we can't reach. Okay, Richard, you got me. I'll bite the bullet. Kill all the humans that we can't reach who still continue eating animals.
What are you what would you have recommended as a solution to Hitler?
I think
should we have listened to Gandhi and just thrown ourselves off of cliffs?
Exactly. Nazis were using violence, which is what begat violence and caused World War II.
Oh, okay. Everybody is just supposed to agree with you. Okay. So
no.
You, in order for this nonviolence bullshit to work, everyone has to agree with you. Well, guess what? Not everybody agrees with you, so your stupid ideas don't work.
Here he is. Okay, hold on one second for me. One moment, please. Good afternoon, sir.
Yeah, somebody just sent me a link of you reacting to the interview I did with Raphael Alive. I only caught a little bit of your reaction.
I was just getting to the good stuff, apparently.
Yeah, and I think somebody asked me to debate you about some things before. So what were some of your disagreements with the video?
I actually was just getting to the good stuff, but I'll tell you what the things that I think I disagree with. Right now you guys are talking about whether or not we should use the Holocaust word. I totally agree that we should. I think that, I disagree with your definition of veganism, I guess. That's one of the big things I disagree with. The idea that you don't burn bridges, I gotta laugh out of that one. I think you burn bridges quite a bit. But that's as far as I'm into it. I'm only 35 minutes in. I would like to ask you, though, about this horse riding thing. Everyone keeps telling me that you're defending horse riding. That doesn't seem very vegan to me.
Yeah, sure. So my position on horse riding is most of it is unethical. 99.9% of people who ride horses do it unethically. But if you're using consent training, where you train the horse to consent to being ridden, where regardless of whether or not they choose to ride, you give them a reward. If you don't use pain compliance devices like bits, whips, or spurs, and you don't do excessively hard riding, doing jumping for hours and hours, and it's just more controlled, vigorous exercise where they get to run. I think that's ethical because horses are pretty lazy animals, and in the wild, they would normally walk for very, very long distances each day. And also they'd have to run away from predators. They also have natural competition between horses, especially males, for dominance and stuff. So they get a bit more vigorous exercise when they're out in the wild. When you're talking about I'm almost done. When you're talking about horses in captivity, they might have maybe a square mile or so of free space in a paddock. So they're really just going to be eating grass, walking a little bit, eating more grass, and they can end up getting fat. And obesity for horses is extremely dangerous. It's bad enough for human beings, but for horses, it's particularly bad. So, yeah, so if you can get them regular, vigorous exercise, it makes them live longer, it makes them healthier, and as long as you're not emotionally traumatizing them and physically harming them, I think that's a good way to keep a horse. If you have a pet dog, you're gonna, walk your dog, make sure it runs, throw a ball for it. That's sort of something that you kind of have to do with a horse if you're being a responsible caregiver.
Yeah, I guess if you're a responsible pet owner, you're still engaging in what's akin to slavery. Consent training sounds a lot like grooming to me. We're gonna trick them into breaking their own spirit somehow through Pirelli training. I have a lot of experience with horses. I grew up around horses. My mom had a horse for a very long time, and she did bitless riding and everything. But even though my own mother was complicit in the crime against those horses, I still don't see it that way. This is something that's very not vegan. I mean, owning a pet is not vegan. Treating an animal like a pet and tricking yourself into thinking that they're consenting to being ridden is anthrocentric, right? It's very much human supremacist thinking, and I don't see how that jives with even your definition of veganism.
So, do you think pet ownership, regardless of context, like let's say you rescue an animal from a shelter, you're actually against that? You think they should like stay in a shelter or just be euthanized?
I think that we've painted ourselves in a pretty horrible corner when it comes to pets, and people are having to do things that I would probably be philosophically or in principle against. So I don't really have a very good answer because there really is no good answer. You're in a catch-22. If the question is leaving them in a shelter or bringing them to someone's home, it's like having kids in foster care or in an orphanage. Neither are very good, right? I just read recently that 75% of people incarcerated in America were in the foster care system. That's a fucking crazy thing that I don't even know if it's true, but I mean, it's something that I read this week that I was blown away by a statistic of it being that high. So, I mean,
Okay, but
good answer doesn't really give us
I mean, but the issue is we're never going to have a perfect world where everyone lives eternally in perfect peace and bliss. So when you're talking about a situation that might not be perfect, I mean, we're not working towards like, I don't know, some sort of zero-sum game where it has to be perfect or else it's wrong. Between the two choices of leaving an animal I guess it's three choices: leaving an animal in a shelter,
euthanizing them or bringing it into a foster care,
or adopting the animal and trying to give it the best life it can have. Like, what's the best option?
Well, I mean, statistically speaking, you're still going to find most pet owners abuse their animals. By far, most pet owners abuse their animals. So I would still have to say, well, we're still screwed either way. It's definitely a catch-22, which is one of those reasons why I like to focus on the trillions of animals that are being killed because we're commodifying them, and also banning of breeding of animals, period.
Yeah, so, I'd agree. I want to ban animal breeding too.
Yeah, but, I think...
like, are you an ethicist by any chance?
No, fuck no.
It's
practically a humanist.
It's kind of strange that you'd mention most pets are abused. I would say most children are abused.
Oh, an interesting point. But I mean, that's perhaps certainly have that. That's certainly possible, but humans aren't necessarily owned, at least in our countries. And
they absolutely are. Until you're 18, your parents own you.
We have guardianship and things like that. You have emancipated minors if they, in certain situations, to get out of that. They have rights that animals don't have. Children might be quote unquote owned, but they still have rights, and they have advocates.
Pets have rights too. There are animal rights, and most of the animal rights cover pet ownership. I don't think they adequately protect pets, especially since they can't advocate for themselves.
Right.
And I do think there's an issue with pet ownership where literally anybody can own a pet. I think that's a fundamental problem with human beings. I don't think anybody should be able to have a child. But creating laws and legislation around having a child is very difficult. There's difficulties with regulating the pet industry and regulating who can and can't adopt. But when we're talking about people who are ethically minded, like vegans, I don't see it as a moral bad for somebody who actually has an interest in helping animals, who is mentally competent to, adopt a pet and can actually take care of it well.
Which I'm not here protesting people who are adopting animals at shelters. I mean, I just feel like we need to be addressing it at a much higher level. And I don't like the idea of normalizing owning animals, bringing them into restaurants, bringing them into hotels, and all of the things that go along with lugging these slave animals around, which is what they end up being. But that's a whole other. I don't really have a solution here and to focus on this. The only solution that I can think of is really going after puppy mills, going after the sale of animals. I don't think animals should be allowed to be sold. All of these adopt, don't shop ideas. This is why organizations like almost every animal rights organization says adopt, don't shop, because there's really no other thing to say. So you're just stuck. I don't know, but with the idea of riding horses is a little bit different than that to me, but because we are talking about okaying it, and this is something with you especially that is difficult with vegan gains, not with your ideology necessarily, but the fact that you're saying things like this with as many subscribers as you have. I've done a campus tour where young men, they watch your show, they love you. You're a charismatic person and they like you, and they're telling me they kill spiders, they kill these animals in their homes, they kill animals if they see a spider, they step on it, just crazy shit like this to me. And they're part of the vegan club, and they're talking with other young people about veganism, and that's going to be their definition of it, is killing carnivores. And I don't mean to switch too much, but I'm the same kind of thing with riding horses. There are people in my chat that'll be like, Vegan Gain says it's okay to ride horses.
Okay,
as a vegan.
well, yeah, so we kind of covered this issue in the interview. I don't know if you got that far yet. But
No.
there's always going to be people who might misunderstand a message. I kind of analogize this to, we adopted all of our animals. We didn't buy them. So, we have very beautiful dogs. Like we have Finn. He's a really cute Pomeranian Chihuahua mix. If I were to walk that dog outside and somebody were to see me walking this like really beautiful Pomeranian, that might inspire them to go out and buy a Pomeranian from a breeder because they want a dog just like that. Now, have I done anything wrong? Have I violated any animals' rights? So I would say, yeah, when we're talking about some of these issues like riding horses, we do have to have some reverence for the fact that people can misunderstand the message, and we have to be clear with what we're saying. But
especially you, though, that's kind of what I'm saying, but especially you, because you have a huge following. If Vegan Gain says it's okay to ride horses, they're going to misunderstand.
Well, that's not what I'm saying. I think I've made it very clear that it's not just okay to ride horses. You have to do it in a specific way and for specific reasons.
But that's waffling. And what I have gotten onto with it seems inconsistent.
How is that inconsistent, and how is that waffling?
Because you're negotiating because rather than take an abolitionist approach.
Well, that is abolitionist.
It is an abolition when you're saying sometimes it's okay. When is it okay to own a slave? Is it sometimes okay to own a slave? I don't think it's ever okay.
I don't understand how you're making the comparison between adopting an animal, trying to give it the best life it can have in captivity, and slavery.
Because you're using the horse to ride them. You're using animals to derive pleasure. You're using one for companionship. You're using this one for that. And I like to keep things very clear. And I say, okay, I'm completely against owning animals in any way, shape, or form. I don't care if they're called companion animals or animal companions or pets. I don't believe that it's okay, because I'm vegan. I don't believe that it's okay to own an animal ever. And I know that
I think we need to kind of resolve what we consider to be exploitation, because I could be in a romantic relationship, and the reason, like one of the motivations to be in a romantic relationship is to fulfill some sort of emotional need that I have to be loved. Does that mean a romantic relationship is inherently exploitative just because I'm benefiting from it in some sort of way?
No, but veganism is a response to an overwhelming degree of exploitation already occurring.
Sure.
Veganism is a response to that. Veganism is a stance that I will not partake in that in any way, shape, or form by not using animals, because we're not objectifying them anymore. That is what veganism is. It's a very simple concept that people like yourself, you've complicated it. People like Lifting Vegan Logic and others have turned it into threshold deontology or some kind of permutation of utilitarianism. But at the end of the day, it's a response to the status quo, and the status quo is exploitation is rife. We are having a problem with it, and we're taking a stand against it.
Okay, but let me give you, this might be an idealized example, but let me just give you an example of pet ownership. Like I can at least say this for myself. I like dogs. I like cats. I'm not going to say that one of the motivations for adopting these animals isn't just because I personally like it and I get some sort of enjoyment for it. But ultimately, the idea behind it is I recognize that these animals do need help. They're in a situation where they're worse off without me. And I'm trying to do everything I can to give them the most amount of well-being possible. I do have to restrict their freedoms. I can't let them go outside because, they might kill a mouse or something, or they might get themselves into trouble where they could get eaten by a coyote. But, I try to take my cats out on walks regularly. I'll carry them in a backpack outside so they can get some sort of enrichment. I play with them indoors. Same with the dogs. Like, we take our dogs outside every day.
Of course, man.
Where's the exploitation? But where's the exploitation and the moral issue in any of that?
The moral issue is the principle of veganism, and by saying that, like, someone might have. Because I think that you're more apt to say that someone isn't vegan than I am, because I know that sometimes we have to get into these negotiations or compromises, especially if you had pets before you went vegan. That's a fucked up situation that I know a lot of vegans get into. They've got a pet python or something, and now they've gone vegan. I mean, holy shit, you're fucked. So like, there's no good solution there. You have these situations that you might have, again, painted yourself into a corner, but also, like, there are things that are acceptable. I mean, Gary Francione likes to say that he's got refugees, right? His big dogs are refugees, and it's a convenient thing to call these animals. But he gushes on them. It's socially acceptable to have them. It is a way to make oneself feel better. But all those things. I'm not here saying that anyone who has pets isn't vegan, but I don't think that pet ownership is a vegan thing. And my position on it, because I think that that owning animals is exactly what veganism is against, commodifying animals. By participating in the ownership of animals, you're entering that whole species into, well, you're not entering into it, but they've already been entered into our economic system. Each dog has a value. Even your rescue dogs have a value. They have a dollar sign assigned to them that when you're gone, or if anything goes wrong, or if they get lost and they're found in the streets, they have a dollar sign assigned to them. And it's because we've put them in this position, right? They're kind of like little house slaves for us, little house elves, kind of like a Harry Potter elf.
I'm just wondering, like, let's say there was a mentally disabled child within a foster system. Would you say that's unethical to adopt the mentally disabled child?
Mentally disabled children are not commodified in our society. They don't occupy this position of slave. They just don't. Animals do.
But I don't understand how that changes the circumstances for the individual. And to an extent, they are commodified. You can get huge tax benefits from adopting these kids. There are YouTube channels, like, especially now with social media, you can commodify children like crazy. Some of the biggest, most profitable YouTube channels, involve child content.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I guess you might have a point there, but I would still say that animals and humans don't occupy the same status in our current. In the status quo, and the status quo right now is that animals are commodified, are enslaved, and veganism is a response to that. And the response to that is a hardlined deontological approach to no use of any animals. That's how I fight the commodification of animals, is by not participating in the system.
But how am I commodifying animals by rescuing them and adopting them?
Well, you've already put it there. You're normalizing owning them. You said someone might see you with them. There's all these other things.
I mean, If that's going to be the argument that you're normalizing a
That's not
type.
the only argument. That's one
Okay.
argument. There's also the fact that they're bred. The animals that you have might have been bred, and it's like backyard chickens.
Yeah.
To me, there's not much of a difference between rescuing a dog and rescuing a chicken and getting something out of the deal. Maybe one you just get warm feet at night, and one you get eggs out of. But to me, it's the same thing at the end of the day.
Okay. Maybe we should actually debate the definition of veganism, because I think that's kind of core to this issue. But like the issue for me, I don't see how I'm violating the rights of any of these animals when I adopt them. Like
Violating individual rights isn't the only thing about veganism, right? Veganism isn't just about violating an individual's rights. We're talking about entire species here. We're talking about the entire kingdom of Animalia. We're talking about much bigger pictures. I mean, whether or not you're taking a stand against slavery, if you have somebody that you're using as a slave, but you're treating them extremely well and giving them all sorts of freedoms, if you translate it to humans, you'd still say you're not really taking a stand against slavery if you're participating.
Well,
That's all.
the issue though is with slavery, that's an inherently exploitative type of system where you're taking away the rights and freedoms for the individual to be exploited for your own benefit. I don't understand how I'm taking away the rights of my cat Prismo. Or no,
Well,
Beemo.
I don't know if you've.
I
don't know
don't
if you've
see
ever
how
been-
I'm taking
no,
away the rights and exploiting BMO, and here comes Prismo down the stairs. I don't
Well, I don't
understand
know. I
how
don't know
you
that
could
you're
compare
doing.
that to
I don't know that
slavery.
you're doing anything wrong to those individual animals at all. And that's not what I'm accusing you of, even a little bit. But I think that as a principle against the use of animals, against the breeding of animals, against the commodification of the animals, to be participating in owning them is anathema to that position. And I would say, when you talk about, if you've ever visited the United States in the southern part of it, you'll invariably run across somebody that will tell you that they weren't violating anybody's rights. They treated them like family.
Yeah.
They treated them so well. My great grandfather used to tell me about this one, that they had, and they treated, there was just a member of the family. If you cut him free, he wouldn't want to leave.
Yeah,
It's
but
having.
the difference there though is, despite them being treated well, they were exploited for somebody's benefit by being bred into existence.
Same as your dogs or a horse.
Right, but I wasn't part of that process. Like there are people who have children for the purpose of exploiting those children. They
Yeah.
do it so that they can get rich and have like super babies who become famous. Then they can, live off the backs of their kids.
Yeah, but I think we'd
they're-
be against that, right? We want to defend that.
Well, right, but that doesn't mean adopting children who may have been I don't know if there was an alternate history where Michael Jackson
Yeah, I get what
end
you
up
mean. I get what
getting
you're
into
saying.
foster care. Like me adopting Michael Jackson,
Yes,
that
but
doesn't mean I'm responsible for that sort of mistreatment that occurred, and I don't see how I'm normalizing it by adopting Michael Jackson.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that you're responsible for it. I would just say that wouldn't fall under like if we call it a vegan act, right? Because veganism is an extreme response to an extreme status quo. What is happening today, the current state of the union, if you will, is that animals are being abused at 2 trillion a year. That we're owning, enslaving, all the rest, all the shit we're doing to animals. Veganism is that hard line saying, I will not participate. Now, if you said that, well, we're not saying that all adoption's bad because of a few things that happen here or there, or even if it's rampant. Well, we don't really, I don't even know, I don't think that there's a word for that right now. That's like, I'm so against human oppression that I am taking a hard line against any kind of adoption or something. But we have that in the animal world. We call it veganism. That's what that is. We don't use animals. We don't own animals. We don't participate. We don't pick up feathers and put them in our hair or make dream catchers out of them.
So I think I'm kind of understanding a bit of your position that we kind of want to step back and wash our hands of all of it. We just want to show everybody that, owning pets is wrong. Like, we shouldn't breed animals into existence, things like that. And by not having any animal ownership, that's encouraging that sort of behavior. But again, we are trying to think of the well-being of these animals, and like these animals do exist, unfortunately.
Totally,
So
which is why
I don't I like that's the issue though. You're kind of conflating the problem of breeding and exploitation with just the simple act of adopting these animals, even though you have nothing to do with the process of breeding and exploitation. You're kind of conflating the like me. I think you can see her right there, her little that little kitty. Yeah, you're kind of conflating me adopting BMO with the breeding and exploitation, which I had no part of.
Yeah, sort of, because we are participating in it when the whole idea of stand back and wash your hands clean to some degree. I mean, it really is. I mean, it's a distilled, but yeah, I think pretty close. Yeah, wash your hands and stand back. But what I said before is still valid. I think that we painted ourselves in a corner where we have so many animals being euthanized. We have so many animals being neglected and mistreated. What the hell do you do for the individual? We get into these kind of I know threshold deontology will say, well, you've met the threshold, but I think that extemporaneous responses to going to a pound and seeing a puppy dog look into your eyes and feeling empathetic towards that animal and wanting to take them home and give them a better life so that you spare them the gas chamber, that does not develop. That does not really affect your policy in your brain about how you want to navigate the world. I don't. If someone broke into my house right now, we scuffled and they died, that doesn't mean that murder's okay all of a sudden, right? That's just, again, in an extemporaneous situation, some shit went down and I tried my best. I feel like that's kind of what people are doing. Maybe yourself. I don't want to paint you with my own brush, but maybe yourself as well. Like you're in a situation, you're trying to do all right by the animals, it's a fucked up world and you're going to run into some contradictions. But I am not like you, where I'm not going to go, well, you're not vegan. I mean,
the problem is I'm not seeing a contradiction. I can understand the concern that, okay, if I walk my dog Finn outside, that might encourage somebody to breed the animal. But I don't know how any of my actions are necessarily either supporting animal abuse or exploitation, via breeding.
Animal objectification and ownership is the same thing. If you have now we like to change the words and call them companion animals or whatever, but at the end of the day, it's animal ownership. And that is objectification, and
okay,
that is.
So, would you also apply this in a human context? So, like, there are people who have children for, I'd say most people have children for selfish reasons. Either I think most pregnancies are completely by accident and completely unplanned. Some people deliberately plan to exploit their children. Try to make them Hollywood megastar actors, like Michael Jackson's case. Like again.
Social media is unbelievable right now. People they have from the sonogram to death now. They'll be online. It's a little absurd and
So like, would you encourage somebody to never have children so that they can also have this sort of policy of the children should never be used like this? So I'm never going to have my own children. I'm never going to adopt children, because I don't want to be part of this exploitative system where people are having children out of wedlock without any concern for, their reproductive ability. They're having kids for selfish reasons, like, to make them megastars or super athletes and, make money off of them, or, for social media clout and influence.
But the things you're mentioning, I think, are largely frowned upon. And again, I'd have to say, we are not killing 2 trillion children a year. We're not raising children in cages. Largely, at least it's not normal to raise them in cages. I'm not driving by. I was at a Tyson food processing place today, and they've got a chicken with a fucking top hat on, where thousands of chickens are being murdered every day. That's where I was today, and we don't have that equivalent for children, And so if if we did, then maybe there would be something like a vegan for what you're describing. And I think that, when it comes to the human equivalence, I'm against everything you just said, but I don't know that I need the tool of veganism or to take a hard line against it. I mean, I've been vegan a long time, and I've gone through like all these feelings of compromise and contradiction, and some I've just accepted are there are going to be contradictions, but I don't think that changes my philosophy of veganism, wherein I just don't use or own animals or objectify them in any way.
So so I would agree the magnitude of harm when it comes to having children might not be, the same magnitude of harm when it comes to breeding animals. But the harm is still present, so I don't see how that's really relevant. If we're going to recognize that, having children without, taking responsibility over your reproductive processes, having children when you're completely not financially, capable of having them, or, trying to have super megastar babies or, social media clout babies, like that is still happening. Even though the magnitude of harm isn't as great, we can still acknowledge that as being inherently exploitative.
Rich,
So
I think that we're there, though. I mean, we are seeing a world like if you just went back 50 years ago, women especially were highly pressured into having babies at a certain time in life and putting their careers on hold or just foregoing any kind of dreams. And they were kind of sort of forced into by societal pressures or worse to have children. And we're seeing a world where we're seeing less and less of that. You're right that there are still people having children at wedlock or too early or too late and all these things that you're talking about. I can't disagree with any of that, but the world's actually getting better when it comes to that, at least in your and my country, they are. And I mean, we'll see after how long this Dobbs case, how long the Dobbs decision in the Supreme Court lasts, and how that all pans out. But by and large, reproductive rights are something that we're always talking about, we're always thinking about, we're always relitigating, we're constantly doing something about it. Veganism is the answer to it when it comes to animals, and it is an abolitionist hardlined approach. I don't compromise too much with my with my veganism.
Well, sure, things are getting better for child rights. I think they're ever expanding. Like, you can't spank your children anymore or hit them.
You can't do it in school, or you can't do it. Yeah, I mean, there's like, and child labor isn't a thing. I think if you told me that, like, the Dickensian, if we were having this conversation in 1850, when children, labor houses and workhouses for children were pretty common on this continent and in England and all over Europe, we would. I think what you're saying, probably we might say, okay, all these orphanages are using kids to work in factories. Maybe we would need some kind of, but we didn't.
We can go with that historical context. Like, would you have said nobody should ever have children, whether they adopt them or have their own kids, because of the massive amount of exploitation that's happening, with children?
I think that would be an understandable position. People should stop having so many kids is something that societies have tried, right? They tried it during that time period in places like Ireland, and trying to tell people not to have kids and trying to change people's ideas about prophylactics and things like that. So that's something that we have actually employed. We're doing it. We tried in Africa, the idea of so many children, they're not able to feed us during famine times, and all of a sudden you see a lot more education when it comes to condom use and the benefits of that. So I think that we actually do that already.
But
I think we did it then too.
But again, the issue you have with adopting a pet or rescuing them from a shelter is that you think you're being part of some sort of bigger exploitative system. So
yeah, I mean, I think
the system of child exploitation still exists. Yeah, I'll admit it's getting better, but it still exists, and I don't know if it's ever not going to exist. So I see a bit of a contradiction here. If you're not going to have a stance against don't ever have kids, don't ever adopt kids, because you're going to support this massive system of exploitation, I don't know how you can have two different standards when it comes to human beings and animals.
Well, the big one is that humans don't occupy the same status as animals. It's not about the magnitude of the magnitude of the killings and the magnitude of the exploitation, although that is, the chasm between the two is sizable. I would say that the status of children, they do have rights. They aren't bought and sold and traded, and I can't go adopt a kid and then
if you look at the adoption system, they kind of are bought and sold and traded.
I mean, there's certainly flaws, right? But again, they do ostensibly have rights, and I don't think that any thinking person would say that children don't have rights. I've never heard anyone even say that, and I do outreach every single day. And I talk about human children exploitation and how we've outlawed it. We made it against the law to exploit children because we think that children have rights. Now, okay, it does happen, you're right, but it's against the law. Now, are we ever going to get to a world where exploitation of animals doesn't exist? Maybe not, but will we ever get to the point where it's frowned upon so much as human slavery is? I think we will. Human slavery isn't gone, but every time we find it, we try to root it out, and it's met with scorn. And I think the same thing will happen. So
right. But the issue I'm seeing here, whether they have rights or not, there is a system of exploitation when it comes to children. And I mean, we could just talk about this in a purely historical context. If you go back a few hundred, maybe even a few thousand years before we even had the concept of like universal human rights, nobody really had rights. If we go far back enough in time, like, would you have been an advocate of human beings completely wiping themselves out of existence by not having children, and advocated never have children, never breed, because you're going to support this overarching system of exploitation where children are used for labor, children are used as basically a retirement policy?
That's not what I'm saying about animals. Never adopt an animal. That's not what I'm saying.
The problem here is you're kind of bridging too far of a gap. The problem we have with child exploitation is the exploitation part. If we can get rid of the exploitation part, and give children rights again, and so that they don't get exploited in these sorts of ways, like, I don't know, like Michael Jackson or something.
Yeah, man, you're right. But that's not you
personally. Well, the thing is, you personally having children or adopting a child doesn't support that system of exploitation. What would end the system of exploitation is, advocacy for children, advocacy for children's rights, changing legislation so that they can't get exploited and they have some sort of means to get some sort of retribution or something if they are getting exploited. Same with animals. Like the issue
There's
with
a lot of people doing that with animals. They're going through legislation.
Yeah, we are.
And
We are.
Yeah.
But the point I'm making is, if you're going to admit there is the system of exploitation when it comes to children, you wouldn't have the sort of stance, never have kids, never adopt kids, because, you're going to support this overarching system of exploitation. You wouldn't go that far, but you would go that far with animals when, again, in the human context, you can recognize the issue isn't with having kids. The issue isn't with adopting a child. The issue is with that exploitative part. And I don't see myself contributing to that exploitative part. I can understand that, again, if I walk my dog Finn, or if I show my cute little kitty Bimo there on social media, there could be somebody somewhere who sees that and says, oh, I'm going to go out and adopt a pet. But that could happen with a child. If I were to have a beautiful child with my wife, which we can't anymore, she has a hysterectomy and I have a vasectomy, literally impossible. But me being on social media, and if I had like a really beautiful girl or really beautiful boy, and you could see how like amazing our lives are, and we're making money off of this,
Yeah, it
somebody
might
could be
encourage
inspired
somebody
to
else to.
exploit a
Yeah.
child, but I don't see myself violating anybody's rights, and I don't see myself violating anybody's rights from, adopting any of my animals.
Well, and like I said, when it comes to dogs and cats, we get into this situation where we're damned if we do and damned if we don't. Just like you said, it's like playing fuck, marry, kill. You can't win. It's either euthanize, foster, adopt, or leave in the shelter or whatever. But I think that the vegan position is still that I don't participate. I'm not going to own an animal. Now, if somebody adopts an animal, again, just because they see the love in an animal's eyes and they want to help an individual right there and then, it's the same as any. If I see someone suffering, I want to help them. It's not something where I'm just going to stone faced and stoically look at the world. I'm never going to touch anybody and help anybody because of this hard lined principle I've taken. No, I'm merely saying that participating in this, in the commodification of animals, isn't a very vegan thing. And this is why I hate talking about pets, because you end up going back and forth in a circle that there's no solution.
We're kind of going around in a circle, but
Yeah.
I just want to say I don't see, like, I'm not seeing the link where, we have exploitation here, we have
Because,
whatever I'm doing here, like trying to adopt and help these animals,
because
and then
you're
there's
talking
some
about
sort of bridge that's
exploitation.
getting.
Because you're comparing the exploitation of human children to the commodification of all of Animalia, and that's simply not anywhere near each other.
Well,
The
it's like, again, the magnitude isn't the same, but I think we can still recognize that it's happened. So I don't understand how you're bridging a gap when it comes to
human
animals,
beings are
but you're
not
not bridging that
commodified.
gap when it comes to
Because we recognize
humans.
the individual when we talk to humans. We recognize that every human is an individual and deserves and has inherent rights. I mean, since Aristotle, they've been talking about this, the natural law that every human being has inherent rights. We've always had this since the birth of philosophy. Isn't something
Whether
so
we
yes,
recognize it or not, it's still happening, though.
yeah, sure, there's been exploitation, all these other things, but we all thinking people agree. There seems to be human consensus that human beings are individuals, and they're ends in and of themselves and not means to anyone else's ends, whereas animals are only means to our ends. There's the difference. There's simply not much to compare the two when you're talking between humans and animals in this case, or in almost any case when it comes to that. Like, this is why I don't like this whole, if it happened to a human, would you do it? Well, we're not going to do that to humans. We're just not.
Well, we do. Like you've acknowledged that we do. It's just that humans have more recourse
Yeah,
to
because they have
either get
rights.
retribution for when their rights get violated, or more recourse to get out of the situation.
Yeah,
But
because
again,
the
it
status
still
quo isn't.
happens.
Yes, it still happens, but because it still happens doesn't mean that we can compare the two. Because there's some human exploitation doesn't mean that's comparable to animal exploitation. Animals are commodified and objectified, and human beings are not. Human beings aren't objects, and I think
I think we can get into this really far. Like, if you look at things like data harvesting, like we are a commodity. Like, I mean, labor is a commodity. We're commodifying our time. Like, there's plenty of ways we're being commodified.
yeah,
It's
but
just that
we enter into that somewhat consensually, and we do have ways to get out of it. We have ways to we go live in the forest and be wild people again if we wanted to, but we trade some of our autonomy for money so that we can have convenience, and that's something that we've all entered into because we enjoy the conveniences and the trappings of modern life. So we sell. I deal with some of the bullshit from my boss because I know that I can pay my rent more easily and I can live a happy life, or a convenient life. I mean,
okay.
this is something we choose.
Okay, I don't think we're making much like headway on this topic, but yeah, just the fundamental point that I'm trying to make is that I think you're just drawing a bridge where it doesn't exist. Like, again, if the fundamental problem we have is exploitation, I don't understand how you're contributing to the exploitation merely by adopting these animals and trying
The
to give them a
fundamental
better
problem
life.
is not just exploitation, it's the objectification of animals, it's the commodification of animals. It's not simply the exploitation, it's so much bigger than that. It's the fact that animals are seen as means to our ends, and they are not means to our ends. They are not things that we get to use to make ourselves sleep at night better, or to, I don't know.
You can say that about children.
You could say that about children, I suppose, but once again, children do not occupy that situation in the status quo. They do not occupy that status, and animals do. Human children are still seen as individuals, and animals are not. They're just completely different statuses, like different.
I would say to a lesser extent that's true, but I wouldn't say blanketly that children aren't seen as commodities or a means to an end.
You could even say that you could make an argument saying that child rearing is a lot more like indentured servitude, whereas animal keeping is more like slavery, because a human being, once they do reach a certain age, by law they belong to themselves, and so you could say that they have to. It's a lot more like indentured servitude if you really want to say they're being exploited for the first 18 years of life, which I don't necessarily agree with, but. I mean, they do have an end date to them where they are fully actualized human beings and make their own decisions. And animals will never have that. They either end in the slaughterhouse or at the end of a needle or whatever we decide.
Well, again, you can just ask people why they had kids. Oh, well, I think they're really cute. I thought it would be fun. Oh, I just wanted my kid to be like a celebrity so that I could make money. Oh, I wanted to be a superstar athlete, but I could never do it. So I was hoping my kid, like that was the case with my parents. So I disagree with, but I
there's
think
a biological imperative as well. I mean, there's certain things about just evolutionarily speaking. I mean, we are here to, in some degrees, through our natural urges to have children, right? Just animals who fuck a lot, like bonobos. We're going to have kids. So, I mean, it's not quite the same. I just don't think it's the same at all, actually, because again,
the motivation, there might be different motivations behind it. Sure.
It's not just about the exploitation. Yes, human beings are exploited and animals are exploited, but by and large, humans are not seen as just a means to our ends. And when people do treat human beings as means to their ends, they're looked at as barbarians or evil dictators, or they're looked at as people who behave that way are disgusted. People hate them. They abhor them as abominations of humanity. They hate them so much. This is why people hate people like Hitler's, because he used people in such a way that it was, unspeakable. But if you do it to an animal, it's okay.
So you also said you disagree with me on the definition of veganism and culling carnivorous animals. Did you want to cover that?
Yeah, why not? I like I like having conversations with you. Thank you for coming on here and talking with me, first of all, and being way more polite than I thought you'd be, to be honest. So I appreciate you. I do. Let's talk about the carnivores, because I tell you the biggest thing I have with the carnivore thing, because I really look at it as like you're living in a Star Trek living. I don't want to be. You're discussing like it's a Star Trek episode, like this wild hypothetical far into the future, and it's kind of fun to talk about, right? But my problem is, again, I have met people who. Your adoring fans who are literally killing insects because they think that they're carnivorous and Vegan Gain says it's okay.
Yeah. So, I'll go over the basic argument. So when it comes to odd order predators, we know they're going to kill many animals. At least if you define veganism the way I do, you're essentially granting animals the same rights as trade equalized human beings. So if you have a bunch of predatory species, so like wolves killing deer, for instance, one wolf is going to kill many deer over its lifetime. If you can kill that wolf, you're going to prevent many other rights violations from occurring. So in the same way, we would be okay with killing xenomorphs or vampires or name your movie monster to
Yeah.
save human beings. Well, those wolves are the same as xenomorphs or vampires to the deer. So
I,
I don't see any logically consistent basis where we would grant rights to human beings, like a right to live, and we'd be okay with killing some sort of, monster like xenomorphs to protect human beings, but we wouldn't be in favor of killing wolves to protect deer.
okay, two things. First, can I ask you a question about what about pelicans, man? We're going to kill all the pelicans?
If they're odd order predators, then yeah,
Yeah.
possibly.
All
Pelicans are
right.
cool, but they're
Yeah.
also
Most,
horrible.
but
They'll
almost
they'll
every.
literally swallow other birds and like suffocate them for like I think like 30 minutes. This one pigeon suffered before it like finally died in this pelican's mouth.
Yeah, there's been. I mean, I've seen hawks do the same thing to pigeons. I mean, they not suffocate them in their little their pouches. I don't have that obviously, but sit there, just hold them with their talons and wait for them to die. But they're not like xenomorphs. Xenomorphs and all movie monsters, they attack healthy humans that are in the prime of life, usually sexy young co-eds and stuff. But a wolf and a lion and all of these, they occupy a niche in the ecosystem where they are getting the malformed, the old, the sick, the weak. In a way, they're almost nature's tools to push along evolution, so that the species itself actually over time gets better because they are dying. The ones born with three legs or two heads or whatever, the lions get those. They don't hunt like xenomorphs or even like human beings. Human beings go after the biggest buck with the most points on his antlers, whereas lions go after the weakest, most sickly looking animal they can find, because it's a caloric exchange at the end of the day. They don't want to expend more calories to get all this already. But so comparing them to like xenomorphs is completely off. Predators don't behave that way in nature. They occupy a niche in the ecosystem, and human beings. And the second part, sorry, that was my first one. The second part is like this. What happens with ethelists and these people who want to push the red button to end all of sentient life and all that, it really does put humanity on this god level where historically we fucked up pretty much every time we do anything like this. Every single time. There's been very few success stories when it comes to fucking with the animal kingdom and trying to tip the scales in any way, any meaningful way. We usually fuck it up. I don't see why this would be any different.
Okay, so the number one reason for why you're okay with, say, wolves killing deer is because they have some sort of useful function for killing off like the weak, sickly, genetically unfit, and they improve the overall health of the species.
The only thing I would disagree with there is the phrasing. I'm not okay with wolves killing deer.
Okay,
I'm
sure.
against killing the wolves to prevent it. I'm against human beings getting involved to prevent what niche the wolf is occupying in the ecosystem.
Okay. So, say there was some sort of animal. We like again, we could just use like a movie monster example. Let's say xenomorphs preferentially attacked weak,
Looking off the
sickly, old human
Yeah.
beings. Would you be okay with that? Like, you wouldn't be in favor of killing off xenomorphs?
I mean, that's a really good question. But I would say that humanity has gone to extreme lengths to try to keep ourselves from living in this natural world. We've gone to the point where we want to have nothing but excess and convenience. So probably not. I'm not really sure. But I would say that to put it in a more real world scenario where would euthanasia, not like assisted suicide and euthanasia for the elderly, we kind of do some of that. We do some of that in nurses have been incarcerated or have gotten away with it for putting people to sleep that shouldn't. Doctors do it all the time where they make judgment calls based on whether or not someone's going to make it. We do it in utero with people that are born with we see are going to be born with deformities, or just highly likely that they won't live past the age of XYZ. So we abort. So we do this. We kind of do it with technology already. We're actually working towards trying to, genetically manipulate, not manipulate, but probably also manipulate, but to genetically pick that's what they do with in vitro fertilization, right? They pick which are the most viable embryos, right? The ones that they think have the best traits or whatever they're looking for. So we're already kind of doing that. So we don't really need a xenomorph, do we? So, I mean, I'm not against any of that shit we're doing.
Yeah, but I mean, the difference here is that when we do some of these things, like mercy killing somebody who's like deathly ill, that's done for the sake of their own benefit, and in many cases they consent. Like I know in Canada, assisted suicide's a hot topic right now. But again, if we were to apply this to like, hypothetical xenomorph that just preferentially goes after the weak, the old, the sickly, you would presumably still have a problem with that. Like if somebody was too elderly to run away from a xenomorph, you wouldn't want them to die just because they can't run fast enough from a xenomorph. You'd want them to keep living because, like, again, just because they're not fit enough to run away from the xenomorph doesn't mean they shouldn't live.
Yeah, I mean, we have lions in California, and every few years a lion will get an old person or a really young person. A lion will pick off a hiker who's not walking fast enough, or a little kid that wanders in the wrong way, and we don't go and kill all the lions. We don't say, "Oh, those damn lions, let's go kill them all," because we could give them their distance, and we generally don't get killed by lions. Now, sometimes we do get killed by sharks. We get killed by sharks. I lived in Dana Point. Every 10 years or so, someone gets eaten by a shark, or at least partially eaten by a shark. We have shark attacks. I don't think we should go and kill all the sharks because a human being got bit or got eaten.
Yeah, but again, in the hypothetical, you're talking about an animal that fills some sort of niche where they preferentially hunt people. So, like, again, in the hypothetical, if a xenomorph were attacking weak, sick, old, young, elderly, people who are easy prey where they don't have to expend so much energy to kill them, like, again, you wouldn't be in favor of it, assuming there was an animal fulfilling that sort of ecological niche.
Oh, lions don't just hunt gazelle, right? They hunt anybody that isn't moving fast enough, right? They're not picky. Same with
avoid
wolves.
people. No, they
Generally
absolutely
because we're dangerous.
People.
Yeah, we're pretty dangerous. We're scary.
It's not just because of that. They don't like the taste fundamentally. Lions will only really go after people if they're desperate, starving, very dehydrated, like during a dry season where they're really desperate for food. But lions don't have a taste for people. But again, like in the hypothetical,
lions do eat people. Lions have eaten people. They do eat people.
I know, but again, in the hypothetical, if there was an animal that would normally fulfill an ecological niche where they preferentially eat human beings, would you or would you not be in favor of eradicating that species?
Eradicating a species, probably not. But these hypotheticals don't really wash, because there's no animal that just has they only eat, unless certain animals only eat certain insects, I suppose, or like certain bats only eat moths or whatever. You can go kill all the bats, I guess, because there's certain bats that only eat this one kind of moth in Nevada, and they have to.
Again, we in this hypothetical, we can assume the xenomorph also, like, I don't know, eats dogs or something, but it preferentially seeks out human beings.
Well, yeah, but xenomorphs are, in the movie at least, represent an existential threat. And none of the animals you're describing as far as carnivores represent an existential threat to any species on Earth. No animal is
not
hunted.
Necessarily to a species, but to the animal they're attacking, absolutely.
Yeah, but we're not talking about individual animals again. Again, an individual is another extemporaneous example of a
Like,
person breaking into my house and I fight them and I kill them.
like again, I'm not like again in the hypothetical. We're not assuming xenomorphs would eradicate the entire human species. We're assuming it fills an ecological niche. So humans will still exist. Will still be here. But let's say millions of humans each year die, and we breed fast enough to keep up our population.
Yeah, and that like 99% of us get away or whatever. I mean, sure. I mean, I guess we would have to figure out how to live like that. I wouldn't say go out and kill them all. I mean, I know people that lived up in Iceland and saw little kids get picked off by polar bears every once in a while. No one's saying let's go kill all the polar bears.
Okay, so just to be clear, if xenomorphs existed and they fulfilled an ecological niche where they preferentially killed and ate human beings, you would just say, well, let's not kill off the xenomorphs. Let's just let them kill like 1 million people each year.
But Richard, you see why this hypothetical is dangerous, and this is what I'm talking about. This hypothetical isn't a real world scenario.
Well, it doesn't have to. It's about a principle.
But it has. I know, but the principle is that when you say things like that, people that I meet on these college campuses then say vegan gain says it's okay to go kill all these spiders because spiders are carnivores. And that's because we're using these crazy hypotheticals, and these hypotheticals aren't real world examples. The real world example of a wolf is barely a threat to an adult.
Okay, well, here's a real world example. Terrorists exist. ISIS, Taliban, Hamas. They will kill other people for ideological reasons.
Yeah.
Now, we can eradicate these people, go to war, completely wipe them out. We did that with Nazis. Are you against killing Nazis, against killing the Taliban, ISIS, Hamas? Because they can exist and just kill people. Like they're not going to eradicate the human race. Do you think we should allow serial killers and murderers to run around? That are part of these terrorist groups?
Well, there's more than one way to fight Nazism, and we didn't just use bombs. We used money, and after the war, we had the Marshall Plan. Made our worst enemies, and we had what MacArthur did in Japan, which was just as dangerous as the fascism in Germany.
This was after we completely and utterly defeated them militarily, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, they were fighting a 3-front war, and they didn't give up early enough. That's for sure. I mean, I lived in Germany for a long time, and I met a lot of people that were there, and I don't think that we should have killed them all. I don't think we should have eradicated all the Germans, even though you could probably say that every German was a Nazi at the time, because if you weren't, you would probably be killed or ostracized in a way that was really meaningful to ending your life.
Well, again, they're no longer a threat. If you defeat them militarily and they refuse to fight, they're no longer a military threat. Like that, if they weren't and they're hyper ideologically motivated like these terrorists, they will any opportunity they get, they'll murder you. Like, are you fine with these people existing? Once
Nazis were no longer an existential threat, we used other tools, and we didn't just use one tool the whole time. We used all sorts of psyops and all sorts of different ways. It wasn't just a ballistic exchange. We used tons of tools to try to win hearts and minds from within. We did all sorts of some regrettable things as well. It wasn't just kill all the Nazis. I mean,
But the problem here is that you're saying it's okay for a group of animals or a group of people to run around and commit murder, and on a pretty significant scale. Like, you're talking about millions of people that are dying. You're saying it's okay for that to exist.
No, I'm not.
You absolutely are. Like again, in the xenomorph example, I said, let's say if xenomorphs existed in this ecological niche and they killed 1 million people each year, that wouldn't eradicate the human race. It's not an existential threat, but it's 1 million people each year. You said you wouldn't eradicate the xenomorphs. What would be the motivation for eradicating Nazis or the Taliban or ISIS? Presumably you'd be okay with these people existing and still killing people.
If sharks were killing 1 million humans a year, I wouldn't say go kill every shark. That makes no sense. Sharks are fine doing what they're doing. If we're encroaching on their territory, so to speak, and we get killed, that is something that's going to happen. Again, human beings are being killed by polar bears, lions, tigers, all sorts of animals kill humans, and we don't just decide we're going to go kill all of them. In fact, the point of Jaws,
Why
like
wouldn't we?
that part of Jaws where all the yahoos are going out to kill all the sharks because a kid got attacked is exactly what you're proposing, right? Some kid got attacked by the sharks. Let's go kill all the sharks. Like, that makes no sense.
So again, in the xenomorph example, you would not kill off, eradicate all xenomorphs, even if 1 million people per year were dying.
The xenomorph example doesn't fulfill any kind of real world scenario. Whereas
it doesn't matter. It's about the principle. We're talking about a principled position, whether or not we're okay with murder.
If it's not whether or not you're okay with murder.
It is.
I'm not okay with something happening right in front of me. And again, if I could help, I will. But going and saying that another whole species has no right to live on planet Earth because they killed a couple of ours makes no sense. Especially
that's not what we're arguing about. What we're arguing about is these are predatory species that will commit murder so long as they exist. Doesn't necessarily have to be us. It could be other animals, but in the xenomorph example, it's us. So again, you wouldn't be okay with eradicating all xenomorphs if they were killing about 1 million humans each year. You'd want them to keep killing 1 million humans each year.
I don't know. Well, I'll tell you one more thing. I don't know that my human brain could also reckon the ramifications of wiping out an entire species. Like, mosquitoes kill millions of humans every year. All sorts of little bugs kill humans every year. If we wipe them all out, if we kill all the ticks, for example, ticks kill a bunch of humans every year. We killed all of the ticks because of how many humans they took of ours. What about all the animals that eat ticks? What about all the other animals? What about the animal that eats the xenomorph? What about the acid blood that they have that somehow contributes to our ecosystem in a way that was not
that's
thought?
like again, that's assuming that a greater harm would be caused by doing that. But assuming there wouldn't be a greater harm, let's just say this ecological niche wasn't necessary. Let's say, for the sake of argument, that there was some sort of technological way around this.
Richard,
if we could eradicate a species, I'm not advocating for people to just go out and murder like every wolf they see. So again, we're talking about a principled position where if there wasn't a greater level of harm generated from doing this, and you could just eradicate a species, and you could prevent all of these murders without any downsides, why wouldn't you do it?
But Richard, this is why when I started this, that's exactly why I said this sounds like a Star Trek episode. If you want to write a Star Trek episode, you should write it, because I think it might actually get made into an episode. It's a good idea. It's a fun hypothetical for a planet far away in another galaxy or whatever. But it doesn't work on planet Earth, because when you say shit like that,
we're talking about the ethical principle, not whether or not it can be practically applied.
But when you say shit like that, you're giving people a get out of jail free card for trophy hunting lions. You're giving people get out of. You are.
Lions that are trophy hunted live on game reserves. They're bred into existence. So,
the one that's not. I mean, okay, you're giving kids carte blanche to go kill all the spiders that they see in life because vegan Gaines told me that carnivores are evil.
Spiders are horrible animals. I don't know why I'd want spiders to exist.
Because spiders kill mosquitoes, and mosquitoes carry the Zika virus, and spiders feed birds, and birds are beautiful. I mean, there's all a million reasons why why spiders exist and fulfill that niche.
Yeah, so you could make the argument that by killing spiders, you're increasing the amount of rights violations, and you could change my position on killing spiders. But again, we're arguing about the principled position of whether or not we should allow a species that's going to commit mass murder to exist, and assuming you're not contributing to a greater rights violation, I don't see why this is a ridiculous position.
Because it's a utilitarian one that presupposes that we have the clairvoyance. that we have the clairvoyance and not only clairvoyance, but just like,
Well, it's assumed in the hypothetical, so that aspect doesn't matter.
but when people hear these hypotheticals, they start thinking about real world applications. And like I said, if we want to talk about a Star Trek episode that's fun to talk about, that's what we're doing. But if we're talking about real world applications like killing wolves, spiders, lions, or XY or pelicans, people start thinking, okay, it's okay to kill pelicans now. But
that's not what we're debating. We're not debating the practical application. We're debating the moral issue of whether or not it's ethical to eradicate a species, assuming it would reduce rights violations.
Rights violations. First of all, an animal can't commit a rights violation because they have no understanding of the rights that they're violating.
They can. Just because, okay, so if I were to go insane and, like, I don't know, have a psychotic breakdown or do the wrong type of drugs, would I not be violating your rights if I were to kill you?
That's a really good example. The human. We also have temporary insanity laws, all sorts of things where if you did have a break with reality and you weren't yourself and you weren't behaving as.
But I would still be violating your rights. That would just be a mitigating factor when it comes to something like sentencing. That doesn't mean you're not violating your rights.
But we mitigate it because you didn't engage in a rights violation. You could say that whether or not my rights are violated, the effect of what you've done might seem like a rights violation, but because you can't enter into that contract as a moral agent, you haven't actually violated rights. This is why animals get off in this way. We don't hold lions accountable for their actions because they aren't moral agents.
If you're going to have that position, let's say there was a drug let's say there was a drug or a virus or something that made you go crazy, and you grew machine guns on your arm, and you go to shopping malls and mow people down. Would it be wrong for somebody to intervene and kill you?
Oh, you're talking again about extemporaneous ideas of if something's going down. If there's a school shooter and we don't need to go so far as in machine gun hands. We have kids in America that shoot kids in schools.
Well, right, and we kill them.
And sometimes those kids get shot. Yes, and sometimes the police respond. If the police get around to it, they show up and hopefully intervene. And usually when the intervention happens, either the shooter shoots themselves or they get death by cop. Right now, if you said that that's okay now to go kill all the kids. Because kids. I'm
not saying it's okay to kill all the kids. What I'm saying is, if there's somebody violating your rights, it's okay to kill them, whether they have agency or not.
And a lot of times lions die when they try to attack giraffes, and when the giraffe wins, everyone applauds. And a lot of times hyenas die when they attack elephants. This is something that happens.
The point is, I don't see what agency matters. Like you seem to be okay with killing like a kid with a machine gun who's trying to gun down other kids.
Because I don't know if I'm okay with it. I think that when things like that happen, it's unfortunate. I wouldn't say that it would make it okay.
You can have sympathy. You can have sympathy for the perpetrator, certainly. But like again, you seem to prefer that moral outcome.
No, I think that if there were a way to take Osama bin Laden alive, I wish they had done it. If there were a way to have Osama bin Laden stand trial, I wish they had done it.
Yeah, sure.
He's a modern day Hitlerish type of guy.
Well, sure. And if there was some sort of way to not have to kill all the carnivorous animals to prevent them from murdering other animals, I would prefer that outcome. But
you're calling it murder when they don't have the moral agency of a human being, and they're not.
It's still murder.
No, it isn't. It isn't some premeditated thing where they're picking out a rich and famous one that they want to.
Murder doesn't have to be premeditated.
Money, love, murder. Well, at least in the legal sense, has to be premeditated. Yes, it does. We have murder, second degree murder, third degree murder.
Yeah,
we have
and some of those don't involve premeditation.
Manslaughter. We have to prove meditation if you want to get killed.
No, you don't.
If you want to get executed for first degree murder, yes, it is.
Second degree murder is without premeditation.
That's right. Yeah. And then we have also murder by negligence. We have all sorts of things. But I mean, when you're called murder, generally what we're talking about is first degree, which is premeditated assassination.
You just admitted there's second degree murder, so it doesn't require premeditation.
Admitted, I acknowledged. But I mean, like, I'm acknowledging.
By the way, this is a semantic, like, this is just a useless semantic issue. It's killing either way.
Okay, but it's definitely not the same thing. Animals like lions, let's say, aren't going out and saying what they're trying to do is fill their bellies for the least amount of expenditure, which is why they attack the weak, the young, the old, the ones that can't run with the herd, the ones that can't get away, and they also don't want to die. They know that they don't have antibiotics and medicine, so they generally want to exert the least amount of energy for the most amount of gain. It's not the same thing as murder.
Yeah, but okay, whether you call it murder or not, we can just call it killing.
You're calling a rights violation. That's a big deal, man.
Well,
and
yes, you're violating the rights of another, regardless of whether or not you have agency over what you're doing.
you can't violate if you can't enter into a rights if you can't acknowledge others' rights and you aren't a moral agent. You can't be the rights violator, which is why animals. And I mean, this is something that the guy who wrote
you could say that about
defending animal rights.
Hitler.
I mean, Tom Regan said the same thing about animals, and he's the one who wrote animal rights.
Okay, well, wait. Let's say Hitler was crazy. Would you say he did not murder a single Jew?
Well, I don't want to get into hypotheticals about Hitler. Thank you, but
wait. If you're saying it's not murder, if you don't have if you lack the agency,
Hitler wasn't crazy.
Well,
Hitler
if
was
he was,
crazy.
well,
he wasn't an animal. He was a person. He was a person bent on something.
Well, let's say Hitler was crazy. He had some sort of bizarre psychotic symptom where he could not understand.
No, I'm not going to play a game, the Hitler game, with you about like.
This isn't a game. I mean, if you're going to have this principle where if you lack agency, then you cannot commit murder. Then if Hitler lacked that agency, by definition, he wouldn't have murdered a single Jew. Correct?
I said that lions don't have the same agency as human beings, and therefore aren't violating anyone's rights. I think that,
and if Hitler lacked that agency, he wouldn't have murdered a single Jew. Right?
This has nothing to do with Hitler. This has nothing to do with Hitler.
Well, right, but the what we're talking about is whether or not you can commit murder without agency. So if Hitler didn't have the requisite agency,
no,
you wouldn't say he like murdered a Jew or any Jews.
What we're talking about is going out and killing all of the carnivores because you think that they're committing rights violations. That's what we're talking about. And my
point is whether or not they have agency, what they're doing is wrong.
Well, then why don't you defend? You're saying that I cannot prove that my claim that they aren't committing rights violations. I'm merely quoting someone like Tom Regan. I'm really basically going off of his book. But what gives you the authority to say that lions are committing rights violations?
What gives you the authority to say they're not? Like, I don't know how to reduce it down any further. There's just
I told you what my authority is. My authority is that they lack the moral agency. They do not have the same moral agency.
That doesn't give you authority. That's just your opinion. Like, again, I have my opinion. Like, that's my moral theory.
Back up yours. What your claim is that they are violating rights. How do you substantiate that claim?
Okay, well, again, if you're going to suggest that because they lack moral agency, they're not committing murder, assuming Hitler lacked moral agency, would you say he did not murder a single Jew?
I'm saying that if lions cannot enter into a moral agent, it cannot operate as a moral agent, then they cannot violate rights.
Okay, and if Hitler could not operate as a moral agent, you're saying he didn't violate anybody's right? I'm not going to
play your Hitler hypothetical because I'm not going to bite a bullet.
This is fundamental. This is fundamental to the argument. If you're going to argue that if you lack moral agency, you cannot violate anybody's rights, then by logical extension, if Hitler lacked moral agency, you would have to admit he would not have violated anybody's rights.
Hitler did not have. Hitler did have moral agency.
Okay, well, again, I'm asking you, assuming he didn't, if we lived
and he wouldn't have been able to accomplish what he did, he wouldn't be able to do it.
He absolutely could have. Let's say Hitler was a robot and he didn't actually have a mind. Like,
okay, so let's take like a Caligula. Caligula was the type of guy that would have prisoners fuck their sisters and do horrible things, and people said he was crazy and all this stuff.
I think he went crazy after he had an infection, by the way.
A lot of people, I mean, there's lots of theories about Caligula, and but like a lot of like philosophers will use Caligula instead of Hitler in order to avoid talking about the worst atrocity in modern history against human beings. So I think that when we talk about Caligula, if he had no moral agency, is what he did wrong? Well, I think he did have moral agency, but had he not, could we say he was just a crazy person that crazy shit went down? Maybe
Well,
we could.
I don't see how that would necessarily mean he didn't violate anybody's rights. Again, if Hitler lacked moral agency, let's say he had some sort of psychotic break or was crazy or had some sort of mental deficiency where he could not understand the moral problem with murder, would
If an
that
AI,
mean...
an AI dictator, like in iRobot, the AI dictator kills whole continents of people, I think, because it's a greater good. He becomes a utilitarian, and in order to save humanity, he kills large groups of people as ruler of the world, an AI ruler of the world. If we did have a robot that was killing 1 billion people in order to save 5 billion people, or whatever the case may be, you could say that those weren't rights violations, if because they aren't actually capable of rights violations. An AI isn't really capable of a rights violation.
Well, when
I
we're
don't know what difference that would make, though.
Well, when we're talking about a rights violation, I think we assume there's some sort of mind in control of a body. Like, I don't know, if a rock were to fall down a mountain, we wouldn't really say the rock violated your rights if it hit you in the head and killed you. So,
Right.
like, a mind has to be present for us to kind of consider it a rights violations.
Okay,
So,
but we're getting stuck on
assuming...
something here that doesn't really matter, because it doesn't really matter.
Again, we can assume Hitler had a mind, but we're just assuming his mind lacked agency. So
you're saying that
Hitler's mind lacked...
the lions are Hitler, and you're becoming a Hitler in order to stop Hitler. Is that what you're...
I don't see how I'm becoming Hitler to stop Hitler.
Because you said you're violating rights. I mean, aren't you violating the rights of lions, though?
Well, you could say you are, but again, it's in favor of protecting a greater degree of rights. Or you could say you're forfeiting your rights when you're violating somebody else's rights. And when it gets to the point of murder, you can use like lethal force in order to enforce rights.
Crime, though. This is thought crime. This is 1984.
What's the thought crime?
I think about killing somebody, and so I am guilty of that crime, and therefore subject to the punishment.
We're not talking about thinking about it. We're talking about somebody's going to do it.
We're talking about lions, right, and carnivores. Yeah, they're going.
Let's say a terrorist has a nuclear bomb. We know that they're about to, set off that nuclear bomb in a big urban center. Would it be wrong to kill that terrorist before he, sets the bomb off?
You're talking about something that's totally different than the animal kingdom. I don't know why.
No, it's not, because we know they're going to. We know they are going to kill. Just like with the terrorist with the bomb, we know he's going to kill.
Again, a lion, a tiger, a bear, all of these animals are occupying a niche. Terrorists are not. Terrorists are killing large groups of people in order to make a political point and scare. They're literally in the name, terrorists.
Again, what we're arguing about now is whether or not you can violate somebody's rights, whether they have agency or not. And then you brought up something about thought crimes.
Because you're saying it's a thought crime, that if before I commit the crime or just think about the crime, there's no nuclear bomb. There's just someone thinking about doing something horrible.
Well, again, if somebody is about to do something and you kill them to stop them from doing it, would you consider that a thought crime?
No, but if somebody is sitting in their basement reading, I don't know, the Communist Manifesto, thinking about a violent overthrow of the government, it is not okay to go and arrest them for it, because they're just thinking about it. They're not actually planning it, doing it. They're not trying to carry it out. Now, that doesn't necessarily
that's not the case when it comes to carnivorous animals.
Right. It doesn't translate to animals, just like none of these things have translated to carnivorous animals. Not one of these scenarios have translated to carnivorous animals.
They absolutely have.
They've done it all.
They absolutely have. The principal issue we have is with murder. We know they're going to commit murder.
The principal issue that I have with animal, this is, again, it's funny because I got in the same debate with Aspie, man, because he's been watching your stuff and he's all crazy about killing carnivores now too. But like everyone that watches Vegan Gains now wants to kill spiders and pelicans. But at the end of the day, these animals are occupying a niche in an ecosystem that we should not have the audacity, based on our own track record, to fuck with. To fuck with these ecosystems has been at our own peril and at the peril of the ecosystem itself. And every single time we have done it, we've fucked it up.
But
and now,
if we knew that it wasn't a necessary niche, what would be the problem with killing these animals?
But we don't.
We do in some circumstances. We absolutely do.
We don't know what the ramifications would be whatsoever. Actually, it's been actually really bad when we killed carnivores. For example, we killed all the carnivores that attack the white-tailed deer. The white-tailed deer population, because we continue to feed them. We feed them with our own agriculture. We haven't done anything about the plants that they eat. The white-tailed deer, now the population explodes because we've killed all the lions, tigers, and bears.
Well, Yellowstone would be a counterexample of that. Wolves left Yellowstone quite a while ago. We reintroduced them. And we found out that there was absolutely no point in doing that.
I mean, I think we're a little young on it still, but I mean, it's funny because there still aren't that many wolves, nowhere near the original amount. But I mean, Yellowstone's been so fucked with, it's a little bit difficult to be like, it's kind of like a little petri dish where,
again, so look, I respect the position that we don't know enough to act upon any of this, but from the principled position, if we did, why wouldn't we?
Star Trek, man. I feel like it'd be a fun Star Trek episode to go into.
But again, I fully respect the position that we don't know enough about these ecosystems to act on any of this, and we should be cautious.
And we've always messed it up. We don't have a good track record.
Right, sure, absolutely. I think we absolutely need to research this more and maybe develop more technology in order to engineer these ecosystems in the way that's most ethical. But assuming we did know that if we were to kill all these wolves or kill all these lions, it would not adversely affect these ecosystems, why wouldn't we if it could save all of these other animals?
Well, firstly, I would say that wouldn't be really a vegan thing, because veganism is about stopping the objectification, commodification of animals. So I don't really know why so many vegans are talking about this hypothetical future world where we can pick and choose who dies based on some greater good. I don't know why we're talking about this at the end of the day.
So would you be against World War II, the United States getting involved in World War II? Because who are we to interject ourselves in other countries' politics? Who are we to decide who bombs
Pearl Harbor, man? We can't let that shit stand. They bombed us on a Sunday. Our boys didn't see it coming.
Like, you believe in the idea of like universal human rights, correct? Like you believe humans should have right to life. We should have a legal system.
World War II is such a good example, because when America finally did join the World War, it was so late in the game. It was 41 by the time. It was December 7th, 1941 when we finally got involved. The world had been at war.
Well, that wasn't late.
The world had been at war since 38 or something. So I mean, if as an American I say 41 to 45, but you ask people in Germany, they say they started in 36 after the Olympics. So I mean, it depends on who you ask how long that war.
Well, it wasn't technically a world war at that point, but
right. And so, but what my point is, even in order to get into the war, we had to claim that we were not only humanitarian, economically, but also that we were fighting an existential threat to our very nation. We had to claim that we were acting in self-defense, even in fucking horribly unjust wars. And I pretty much think that most wars are unjust, but that just like the Saddam Hussein, the second time we went over to Iraq, we had to claim that there were weapons of mass destruction and that they pose an existential threat to their neighbors and to our very way of life, in order to convince the people to sign on to that war. So yeah, we have to.
Well, wait, you're like talking about having this God complex and like, why should we interject? Why should we intervene? Like, again, if you saw a country mass murdering innocent Jews, you wouldn't be in favor of intervening?
I think I would be. I mean, I think so. I think that
Right.
I think
So
it's interesting right now. I think when you're talking about
we see these
geopolitics,
animals mass murdering all these other animals. Why wouldn't you want to intervene if you knew ahead of time that like there would be no negative consequence other than these murderous animals dying?
because there always has been a negative consequence.
Yeah, but again,
There's no
I just
reason to do
asked
it. I mean,
you. It is assumed in the hypothetical you would know ahead of
yes, but
time.
then but that's why that there's no real application, no real world application for this. And when you
Look,
say
we
these
agree. Look, we agree on that. So we're talking
okay,
about the principled position, and every time we talk about the principled position, you talk about the practical application. I agree. Okay, again, I
because my
totally
problem is,
agree. We need more. We need more knowledge, more evidence on this.
but
So
Richard,
when
my
it comes
problem,
to the
my problem
principled
isn't that
position, why wouldn't you want to eradicate a species that's mass murdering another species?
my problem isn't that debate bros are having a good time talking about fun hypotheticals in a future dystopia. My problem is that people watch you and they think that killing carnivores is vegan. And it isn't. It has nothing to do with veganism, has nothing to do with the vegan philosophy, zero. It's just a fun thing that a lot of vegan debate bros are really into talking about. And what happens is I go into a college campus to talk about why animals shouldn't be tested on, and we're talking about vivisection, but instead of talking about vivisection, a practice that kills about 111 million animals in America alone, $16 billion a year are being spent on. It's a very real world problem. Instead of even having that on people's minds, what they want to fucking talk about is it vegan to kill spiders? And this has not just happened once, it's happened a few times.
I
And
I
and I
don't know
don't
what
think when
this has anything to do with the discussion.
because my whole problem with the whole culling carnivores thing isn't that it's actually going to happen.
Well,
My
look,
problem with it is
every
that
time I try to talk about veganism, people just want to talk about Justin Bieber or
do they?
like
The beaver.
what does this have to do with anything?
What does killing carnivores have to do with anything?
We're arguing about killing carnivorous animals and whether or not it's ethical, and then you bring up how like people don't want to talk about vivisection. I don't know what that has to do
No,
with the
no,
debate
it's
we're
not.
having.
No. What I'm trying to say is that I'm sorry. What I'm trying to say is I apologize. I'm not saying that the reason that what you're saying is overshadowing a vivisection, but rather than people learning about vivisection or any of the actual real world problems that animals are facing and why vegans are taking the stance that they are, what they're seeing is people in the vegan realm, people with huge followings like yourself, addressing problems that don't actually exist, addressing problems that we can't actually solve, addressing problems that are really just Star Trek episodes. But really, you have the power. You and Avi and all the rest of these guys that who are these vegan influencers, they have the actual opportunity to talk about the real world shit and mobilize people to actually do something about it.
Well, it is a real world problem when it comes to activism and outreach, because if you ever debate Carnus, they do bring this up about like, what about lions? What about tigers? Like, they kill other animals. And if you don't have an answer for that, it becomes very hard to convince people of veganism. It's a huge black hole if you say you shouldn't eat meat and then you permit other animals to kill and eat other animals.
But Rich, that's exactly the problem. It's not about not eating meat. I'm not saying you shouldn't eat meat. I'm saying you shouldn't objectify and commodify animals. What about lions? I get that question all the time. I do outreach literally every day. And I say, first of all, lions got nothing to do with me. Secondly, lions aren't raping gazelles and stealing their babies so that they can drink the baby's milk. Thirdly, the lions don't own cages. They don't take zebras and put them into tiny
supposedly you have
cages.
no problem with hunters.
Hunters, it's a wildlife crime. I have a problem with hunters because I think it's an entertainment thing. It's not like it's actually for sustenance of any kind or anything.
Okay, well, suppose it is. So,
Well, I tell you
suppose
what.
it
I
is.
tell you what. That's an interesting one. That's an interesting question, Richard. Am I okay with hunting? I think that hunting generally is a fetish that people have. It's a very small percentage. It's not really something I talk about very often because there's always been this fucked up thing that people do. Weird people like Dahmer want to go and I don't know that I don't know that I can actually fight that. But what I think I can fight is people not commodifying and using animals and buying and selling them, and I can fight the slave trade.
Sorry,
I am against hunting,
you're
but we do regulate it. We have ways to fight that.
well. Sorry, are you saying you have no problem with somebody going out into the bush hunting and getting a meal?
I have a huge problem with that. What do you mean?
Right. So then why would you not want to kill carnivorous animals who are doing the same thing?
Because carnivorous animals, first of all, they're literally already part of the status of slave. They're already means to our ends. We're killing them as trophies. They are already in the current state. They are trophies. They are things that we objectify. And now we're saying that this thing that we give no more rights than a chair, that this chair is killing another chair, and therefore I want to stop the chair. I'm not fucking worried about the lion. I'm worried about the 2 trillion animals we're killing every year. I'm worried about every human being who is still seeing animals as chairs.
If you're worried about animals getting killed, then why aren't you concerned with other animals killing other animals?
I'm not even necessarily worried about animals being killed. Animals will die. And veganism isn't an anti-death cult. It's an anti-slavery club. And it's something that's a very important distinction. When I build a house, some animals will die. When I fly in a plane, animals die. I drive a truck. My truck kills little butterflies and all sorts of free living animals that when my trajectory meets them, it doesn't go well for them. I'm not against all. If I could mitigate it, I would, but that's, again, nothing to do with my veganism. My veganism is against the commodification of animals because that's what veganism is.
And lions and tigers and wolves are commodifying gazelles, deer, what have you.
They're not commodifying them.
Absolutely are. They're a commodity.
They do not. They're not a commodity. They have no concept of profit. They have no concept of money.
Doesn't matter. Okay, so like indigenous tribes people. So it's okay for indigenous tribes people to kill animals?
Indigenous tribes people are probably falling back into the hunter fetish. Most indigenous people love to think that all indigenous people are living like it's 1840 or something, like it's a John Wayne movie. They're not. They have McDonald's. There
are uncontacted tribes.
There are some
so
that
you have no problem with
like that. And you know what? A lot of them are using, indigenous tribes before the Columbian Exchange. A lot of them were mostly eating corn. Corn was the staple of their diet, not animals. Animals were a small part of their diet because, again,
so you're fine with that because they don't see animals as a commodity, quote unquote.
No, it's not really. It's not that I'm fine with it. It's that it's not really the thing that I'm fighting against. I'm not sitting here. No, I'm not fine with it. But it's not the thing that I need to really address. What I need to address is the 111 million animals that are dying in labs this year.
I respect that you're prioritizing things, and that, like, yes, it's a bigger priority to talk about like factory farming versus uncontacted tribes people, but
it's not about prioritization. It's about veganism. Veganism is the anti-commodification of animals. Animals
are commodified when you look at a deer and you see food. It doesn't matter if you're a human, doesn't matter if you live in New York City, doesn't matter if you're an uncontacted tribes person in the Amazon, doesn't matter if you're a wolf. If you see an animal as food, I'd say you're viewing animals as a commodity.
I mean, it's an interesting opinion, but I don't think many would hold it or share it. I think that commodification is purely a human activity because of our avarice and our search for profit. They've tricked us into eating corpses at a rate that is just astonishing in the pursuit of profit, not in the pursuit of anything like a lion or tiger might understand, but something that is unique to humanity.
Look, animals will compete with each other.
you play name that trait a lot, and I really think that name that trait, the trait that separates human beings from every other animal on Earth, is exactly that: is our avarice and our economic system. That's the trait that separates us and makes us particularly insidious.
Well, look, I don't think so, because animals will kill other animals, not absolutely necessarily, or for
Some do.
absolutely necessary reasons. Like chimpanzees, for instance.
Chimpanzees, yeah, chimpanzees will
They
hunt for fun, and
Well,
it
no, no,
becomes
no. That's not what I'm talking about. They won't just hunt for fun. They will kill other chimpanzees because they know it will improve their ability to get resources. Other
yeah,
animals do this too. They will compete with members of their own species or
yeah.
a competing species and try to kill them so that they just have greater access
Yeah,
to
they're almost
other
like
resources.
uncivilized human beings. I think that veganism is the way civilized people behave. Civilized people don't use others or behave like chimpanzees. I would
Right.
say that the chimpanzee is something is an animal that we have so much in common with. It's that's why the behavior of chimpanzees is so shocking.
Yeah.
When they're full, when their bellies are full, is when they hunt the most. I mean, that's something that seems very much human like.
Yeah, but like the point is, they are seeing other animals as a commodity. They are being selfish. They are violating the rights of other animals. So I don't know why that wouldn't concern you, even though it's not necessarily a priority when it comes to activism. Why wouldn't you want to impose your values on these animals?
Not just well, one, because they're animals and it has nothing to do with veganism. I think that that's the distinction. Whether or not I don't think it's prioritizing my activism. Like, one is veganism and one isn't. Like, a veganism is a stance against the commodification, objectification of animals. It's not about trying to mitigate suffering, reduce harm, or trying to end rights violations in the wild. It's just not. That is just not that. So when we're talking about animals, you could say, okay, chimpanzees do some crazy shit and it starts looking a little human-y, but when it comes to lions and tigers and bears, it doesn't look human-y. They're killing the deformed, they're killing the old, they're killing the ones that can't keep up. They're not an existential
It's
threat.
still killing. I don't know
And
why it matters if it's an existential threat or not. I don't care why they're doing it. Regardless, it's
well,
wrong. They're
because
violating their rights.
because as you said, I mean, not all killing is wrong, and not all
So
situations are.
it's not wrong to kill somebody who's elderly.
I think that if an elderly person couldn't live anymore, and I think we do euthanize.
Well, let's say they couldn't run.
Yeah,
Let's say they couldn't run a mile in under
but
10 minutes.
in the human context, that's not what we do. You know that in the human context, we have much higher.
You just said it's okay for a lion to kill an elderly gazelle because it can't run fast enough. So,
We have
like,
no.
is
I'm
it
saying
okay for
that.
me to kill the gazelle then?
I'm saying that. Well, I mean, isn't that what you're proposing?
No, not the gazelle. The gazelle isn't violating anybody's rights.
But when the gazelle gets old, or when there's a three-legged gazelle or a two-headed gazelle, who does the lion's business?
Well, again, I don't understand how being old or sickly makes it okay to kill the animal.
It's just Darwinian evolution, really. What it means to make it morally okay is different than what is just
Okay, well, you know what? If we had gladiator battles and we would fight to the death, so only the strongest survive, you're going to have the most physically fit, the least prone to disease. So should we have gladiator battles in the human species to the death? So that only the strongest survive, so that people who aren't sick or deformed. Let's throw mentally disabled people who are crippled into these gladiator pits, and if they can't survive, well, that's good for the overall well-being of our species, right?
Well, human beings kind of do similar things like that.
We don't.
Not gladiator pits, but we have the job market and all sorts of things that separate us. We have social Darwinism.
Doesn't stop you from breeding. Doesn't stop you from living. So are you in favor? So, like, are you in favor of eugenics then? Essentially,
no, absolutely not. But I mean, human beings have have always separated ourselves from nature and tried to be the technological species, not the biospecies that just lets Darwinian evolution take its course. But the lions and the gazelles do. They're just subject to the whims of nature. And by us getting involved and taking our technocrat ideas and trying to impose it on the biosphere,
Okay.
is
So how about in school, the kids who lose the science fair, they all die. So that way we can have like, the smartest in our society, go on.
I mean, of course, it's obviously absurd when you talk about it in human context, because again, we've taken steps for
Well,
generations.
again, you're justifying lions killing other animals because, oh, well, it's good for the fitness of the other species. So
I'm not justifying it. I'm saying that I don't want to get involved in the affairs of animals. I think that getting involved in the affairs of animals has always been folly. It's always been a mistake. We've done it lots of times. We've always 100% fail rate, and yet we're suggesting that, oh well, one of these times we'll get it right. Let's just kill a few more and we'll get it right this time. That's not really. We're saying we'll kill all these carnivores and that'll do it. We'll finally just a few more murders, a few more, and we'll be all right.
Well, again, this is about ethical principles. It's not necessarily whether or not we can apply this practically right now. And I like every time I ask you, like, why is this okay? You come up with these excuses like, well, it's good for the fitness of their species. And then when I apply it in a human context, you completely deny it.
I think that the reason why I say fitness of species is in response to your idea of a human context. They just don't. There's no correlation with a human context and what's happening in nature. We've gone to great lengths to separate ourselves from nature. We have created a world where we have the convenience to say whether or not we want. I mean, you could look at early American settlers used to, when resources were scarce, they would bury infants, and infanticide was a problem in early American colonies. And like Nathaniel Hawthorne writes about it, and how what a deep, dark, dirty secret it was in a lot of ways, a lot for those Puritans. And now we wouldn't say infanticide was okay. And most philosophers would say, well, it's up to society whether or not we can sustain infants. And it's no longer up to the mother, for example, or the parents, whether or not the baby should live, because the society gets to decide whether or not we can sustain the life. Okay. That's not something that lions and tigers can do.
Okay, so you're not in favor of killing off weak, sickly human beings or humans that are mentally challenged, but you would be in favor of allowing animals to do that to each other.
Well, I mean, we do some of it. I mean, I don't know why you think that we're not doing that. We do. We talked about in vitro embryo selection. We talked about late stage abortions because of deformities. We've talked about a lot of things that humanity is doing. Is a lot of things that are kind of unsavory undertakings that we do in order to do exactly what you're saying.
Well, again, just because we do it doesn't mean it's morally acceptable. Some of it, like mercy killing, I'd be in support of when it comes to sickly, like elderly people. When it comes to late stage abortions, I don't know. It kind of depends on what you're talking about there.
Yeah, it gets kind of gray area, doesn't it, with human beings? Like there's things with certain syndromes where the person might live a long time. We don't want them. I mean, Down syndrome is one of them. We don't know the degree, but we know in utero. Well,
again, like I asked you whether or not you'd be in favor of this, and then you just said, "Well, we do it."
Yeah, we already do it.
That's not an answer to the question. I'm asking you, like, you wouldn't be in favor of using these sorts of Darwinian evolutionary principles when it comes to human beings, would you?
I mean, I honestly, when it comes to, it's funny that you say that. I think that on a principle with the idea of Darwinian theory, I don't think that's why the embryo is chosen. For example, we're not choosing this embryo over that embryo. We're trying to pick the most viable one, and so we are kind of like doing it, but we're not doing it for that motivation. You know what I mean?
Embryos aren't sentient, so I don't really see what the moral conundrum would be there. But
I mean, there are people who take moral.
Again, you're justifying.
Late stage abortions, then if you want to say like late stage abortions with the deformities, I mean, we do that a lot of times because of viability or how the enjoyment of life, that we need to start making hard decisions there. And I would defend those decisions between families and their doctors. I think it's important to leave that in the family.
But again, you're justifying allowing like, you know, lions to kill gazelle because, oh, well, you know, they go after the sickly gazelle that aren't genetically fit or are elderly, so it's better for the species. But you wouldn't be in favor of that in a human context. You wouldn't be in favor of
because humanity has taken tremendous strides to stay away from to be something different. We are not just subject to the whims of Darwinian evolution anymore. We are a techno species. We're tool users to this degree that's it's staggering, really, that the tools that we're able to use in order to separate ourselves from the
So you
animal.
would be okay with eliminating mentally disabled people from the population?
No, how do you get that from that? How do
You're
you get
saying
that
we're
from
tool
that?
users, we're a technological species, while mentally disabled people aren't able to use technology.
I think because we, I don't know why you would say that. No, not at all. I don't understand how you got there. What I'm saying is that we aren't subject to the whims of nature and Darwin anymore. We need to make sometimes we have the luxury of compassion, where if we can support groups of people that couldn't support themselves, I think that's a lot of what we're doing with chemical lobotomies and chemical dependency.
Okay, wait, but you would be in favor of supporting mentally disabled human beings?
No. Wait, to do what to mentally handicapped people?
So you just said you'd be in favor of like supporting mentally disabled human beings, people who are misfortunate, like we should use our technology and resource. So why wouldn't we do that with animals?
To support them and keep them alive? Sure. I mean, I'd love to keep all the habitats from being destroyed. I think that's kind of what environmentalism is, isn't it?
Well, right. So if you could keep these habitats alive without being destroyed, and you could eliminate the murderous species that are like harming the well-being of other animals and killing them, why wouldn't you use technology to do that?
I mean, if I don't think. First of all, you've already said it's impractical, and I don't think that that's something that is.
Well, assuming it is, what would be the argument against it?
The argument against it would only be that meddling in it it's this God complex of assuming that we actually could. Assuming that hypothetical is so.
What do you mean assuming we could? Like it's assumed in the hypothetical.
Yeah, but this is the same thing as the F-list red button. We're not gods. We aren't gods. Why would I put myself in the hypothetical where
we're not gods? We shouldn't help mentally disabled people feed themselves. We shouldn't.
No. We're not gods. We shouldn't think that we're psychic and we know how that eliminating whole species would what ripple effects that would have on the entire ecosystem.
What ripple effects would helping mentally disabled people, get a job and work and be able to have their own.
Nothing to do with
we don't like maybe nature, like we should just allow things to work as nature intended and let mentally disabled people or crippled people just die off. We're not gods. Why should we decide for others what's best for them?
What human beings are doing, what human beings are doing is not the same thing, and keeping our species and how we govern ourselves is not the same as going and governing somebody else, a species that has.
Okay, so can you name the trait that's lacking in animals that, if lacking in human beings, would make it wrong to govern other human beings?
Name the trait. Say it again.
Name the trait that's lacking in animals that, if lacking in human beings, would make it wrong to govern other human beings.
I don't know. I don't know that there is a trait right off the bat. What would make it okay to govern what?
Then why are you giving me so much?
But I would say firstly, because you got to give me a second, Richard. Jesus Christ, you just drop a name the trait on me. Give me a fucking break. But I think that one of the big ones would be the consent of human beings to be governed. That's one of the things that humanity in republic, when they build republics, is consenting governance.
Okay,
Even in places
so
like Egypt,
mentally
they
disabled
consent
people would
to
be
being
against
governed.
that. So it would go outside of that. So we shouldn't govern mentally disabled people?
Mentally disabled people, again, a small population of humanity, and trying to do what's best for them by keeping them happy and alive. I don't see why you'd be against that. Are you against that?
That goes outside of the trait you listed.
No, it doesn't. They're. I mean,
You
I know a
just
lot of
said
mentally
consent
disabled
to being
people that
governed. They
consent to
can't
being
consent
governed.
to being governed.
I mean, it depends on the degree of mental retardation or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's not. But most people who are mentally handicapped, they do consent to being governed and stewarded and cared for.
Well, if they don't have the mental capability to understand like what it means to, have like civic duties, or like they don't have the mental capacity to understand like who they should vote for. Like it's very hard to argue for that, especially when you're talking about people who are severely handicapped, where like all
Yeah,
they can
and
do
the
is sit
severely
and drool.
handicapped, I think most the severely handicapped, the catatonic or whatever, we try to do what's hopefully in their best interest.
That
I
would
think
fall right. That would fall outside the
doesn't-
trait you just mentioned.
Yeah, but of course, because you're using an extreme example of what
Yes.
you asked a simple. Yeah, okay. So extreme examples. What are you laughing at? You dropped a name the trait. I'm playing. I'm
You
playing
just
a stupid game.
admitted this would
is
fall
why I don't- this is
outside
why-
the trait you named, but then you made an exception. That's
You're
a
making
contradiction.
you no, it's not a contradiction. You're saying that but what about okay, well, what about catatonic? Fine. Well, we need to start changing the calculus. You're the one moving
Right,
the goalpost,
so they can't
not me.
consent to be governed. So I guess we shouldn't take care of them. We shouldn't do things that are in their best interest because, well, they can't consent to any of it. Just like animals can't consent. So we should just let severely mentally disabled people just die or get eaten by wolves.
I think that certainly it would be up to the society to try to figure out what would be in the best interest. But I mean, these are
guess what's in the best interest of these animals if they're getting murdered by
says
wolves?
you, God, says you saying that what's
You're
in their
saying
best
deer are
interest.
better off getting shredded to pieces while they're fully conscious by wolves. That's in their best interest.
Maybe the weak and the deformed being shredded by wolves in nature might be better for the species.
Oh, okay.
Possibly.
Okay,
Possibly.
so do you think it would be better for our species to get rid of the unproductive members that are wasting
Once
everybody's
again, we are
time,
not subject
making
to
it
the whims of that
not
because
possible
we've
that you
taken-
can do as much productive work? So why don't we feed mentally disabled people to wolves?
I don't know why this is where you always get stuck, isn't it? This idea that human beings are animals, but
They
human
are.
beings have again gone through great effort to separate ourselves from the animals so that we don't have to make those types of decisions.
Look,
because we like living
I
in
just
cities.
asked
We
you
like using
for a
technology.
trait. The trait you mentioned was consent to being governed, and I just demonstrated
You said that there's
mentally
some
disabled people
examples where
can't
they
consent. Right. So there are some mentally disabled people who can't. So you would be in favor of letting them get eaten by wolves or something?
No, because again, that's not what's happening in the wild. They're not just all. There's no existential threat to all gazelles. No wolf will ever go out and kill all of the gazelles like humanity does. I mean, don't you see that your argument is always about killing humans at the end of the day? Because if you wanted to really stop rights violations, as you put it, then you would just kill all of the humans because we're killing trillions a year.
I'm in favor of killing
that's-
humans that kill animals.
That's 98% of them, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, then you're just another ethylist, aren't you? You're just
No. Okay, so tell me, why would you be against killing humans that kill animals?
Why would I be against killing humans that kill animals? Well, mostly because I'm against violence and oppression as a principle. I don't think that we should go around killing anybody. I don't like violence.
So you wouldn't be in favor of killing Nazis?
The whole Nazi thing again. Look, man, that's statecraft.
Well, look, they were only killing Jews. It's not an existential threat to humanity.
It was an existential threat to our way of life. It absolutely was. 100%
Well, not to
it was.
humanity.
Yes, it was.
And it was only an existential threat to the life of Jews.
That's not true. It was an existential threat to the very fundamental way of life. It was the difference between liberal democracy and fascism.
Well, sure, but again, they were only killing Jews. We'd still
They weren't
be
only
alive.
killing Jews. They were killing gays, communists, undesirables, artists, intellectuals. They were killing all sorts of people that just because they had different opinions.
The human race would still be there.
No, it's so fucking disingenuous to always go back to Hitler and the Nazis. Like, oh, so you want to kill Nazis then? That's a disingenuous statement.
No.
And it's intellectually lazy. Yes, it is, because you're saying things that simply aren't true, and they don't have they don't occupy either side of that equation. It's simply disingenuous. It's a lie that you're telling, and people fall for it because in this debate world, you could tell Carson to push a button and the Holocaust doesn't happen.
Look, do you want animals to be killed?
Do I want animals to be killed? No, I guess I don't want them to be killed.
And if the only way to stop human beings from killing animals would be to kill them, what would you do?
It isn't the only way.
Well, if it was, and I can guarantee you there are many circumstances where it would be.
But it isn't, and I have to have. And you might laugh, but I do have faith in humanity that we might be able to change the arc of morality bends towards justice.
Look,
we do believe in
why
justice.
do you think it bends towards justice? It's because there are people who are willing to fight for it. Guess how the slaves were freed? Guess how Nazis were defeated? It was with violence. It was with killing them. So, again, it could. I don't think it's probably going to happen this way because of technological advancement, because society's overall just trending towards
violence is a tool of oppression, which is why you'll go to the South and you'll still hear people call Abraham Lincoln a tyrant because he used violence to solve that problem, supposedly. I mean, it's more complicated than that, of course, like most things are. But using violence doesn't always work. It most of the time just fucks things up.
Most of the time it does work.
It's for expediency.
Look,
sometimes you could say the A bomb ended World War II, but no one's defending the dropping.
Do you think we should have just asked the Nazis nicely to stop killing? Like, do you think we could have just protested in the streets and said, stop killing? Like, no, violence is absolutely necessary. Almost every single conflict on Earth has been resolved with violence.
No, it has not.
That is absolutely true.
Violence is a last resort. Negotiations win peace. Negotiations win peace
after they're militarily defeated.
No, lots of wars have been prevented. The Cuban fucking Missile Crisis didn't end with World War III.
Guess why the Cuban Missile Crisis was resolved? It was because there was a greater risk of conflict.
No, because of a ruse a bullshit.
Do you think if the United States had no nuclear missiles, the Cuban Missile Crisis wouldn't have been a problem?
Of course we had. Yes,
there was a greater risk of escalating conflict.
Yes, and we negotiated it down from there.
Yes,
we didn't
because we threatened to use violence.
Violence as a last resort. Again, violence is not
as a last resort. Not as a last resort. You can't say it was being used as a last resort. If I tell you,
Ted Nugent, the solution to gun violence is more guns. That's ridiculous. The solution to slavery is a little more slavery. The solution to killing animals is killing a few more animals.
To stop shooting. Yes, tell the criminals and the rapists to just stop doing it, please. Like, there's a threat of violence.
That's not all, Richard. Actually, we have socioeconomic tools that we try to employ. We need to get people into the right positions. We need to radically change the way America is policed. There's lots of things that need to go into stopping rape and murder. And it's not just murdering more. It's not more violence. Yeah, violence begets violence.
No, it doesn't. If there is not a threat of escalating force, you're going to have criminals and psychopaths and people who will take advantage of you walk over you.
That's why the death penalty works so well as a deterrent, right?
The death penalty doesn't work as a good deterrent, but again, these people are incarcerated. There is a threat of escalating violence. What do you mean?
Incarceration, but that does not
Incarceration
stop crime.
is a form of violence.
Incarceration does not stop crime.
It absolutely does.
It hasn't. We still have
does
crime.
reduce. You're telling me if there wasn't a jail system that would do nothing to stop crime?
If there wasn't a jail system, I don't know, but jail being one of the tools that we use is perfectly it's a tough pill. It's a unfortunate truth that incarceration might be a necessary evil, but absolutely preferable is rehabilitation and prevention of crime through social programs.
That is still incarceration.
No, through social programs to prevent crime, so that we can.
You can use social programs to prevent crime, but guess what? Criminals don't care.
If everyone had enough to eat, there would be less crime. If everyone had enough to bring their children to the hospital, there would be less crime.
I agree with that.
If everybody had enough money to have
with that, but a massive deterrence with crime is a threat of escalating violence. There's a reason why police carry guns and batons and pepper spray. Like what are you talking about?
And they still get shot, and that doesn't deter violence at all. I live in one of the most violent countries in the world, where everyone seems to have a fucking gun. And let me tell you, having more guns hasn't worked.
It absolutely has. It's a deterrent.
I was in Las Vegas when that shooting happened. I was a block away.
If you ban firearms, only criminals will have guns.
It's not about just banning firearms. It's about reasonable reasonable legislation and regulation. It's about education. It's about social nets, so that we have mental health nets, so when people need help, they can get help. It's so that red flag laws that could occur. It's about national registry. There's all sorts of fucking things that we're not doing.
All of these programs are predicated on the threat of escalating force. Every single one of the programs you just talked about is predicated on the threat of escalating force.
That is fucking ludicrous to say that.
No, it's not.
Yes, it is. That more violence and the threat of more violence.
Every single one of the programs you just talked about is a threat of escalating force. What do you think regulation is based on? It's based on a threat of escalating force. How do you regulate something if you're not going to enforce it? You can't. You have to have a police system. They have to have guns. They have to have the ability to fucking shoot and kill you if you don't abide by the law.
That cops might be again a necessary evil in a world that we were born into, a system that I inherited. But just because I was born in the abattoir doesn't mean I have to threat of violence.
He wants to regulate things without the evil of policing, without the evil of guns, without the evil of... How can you regulate something without the threat of escalating force?
I said that police might be necessary. Police might be necessary.
We can't live in a world where everybody agrees. You can't have a system that works just because everybody agrees. That will never happen. You have to have a threat of escalating force. You just talked about regulation. What do you think regulation entails? It entails a threat of escalating force where some sort of government entity like the police or military will come after you and commit violence against you if you don't abide by those regulations.
If I don't register my car, Richard, no one comes and shoots me in the face.
Yes, they do. Yes, they do. If you try to drive your car on a public road and it's not registered, you're going to get pulled over. If you don't consent to getting pulled over, then they're going to ram your car off the road. If you try to fight the police, and say fuck you, I'm not going to get arrested, well, guess what? They might end up having to shoot you.
The economic tools of bureaucracy are not the same as violence.
They absolutely are.
By and large, when you don't register your car, you pay a fine. If a cop fines you, he gives you a fine, and
that is a form of escalating force.
It's not the same as violence.
That is a form of escalating. Okay, what if you don't want to pay the fine? What if you don't want to have to register your car and you just keep driving? There's a threat of escalating force that requires violence to get you to comply. So again, like what I was asking you before, why wouldn't you want to kill meat eaters if that was the only way to stop them from eating meat? Because
it's not the only way.
If it was the only way,
this is why your hypotheticals.
What if it was the only way?
Hypotheticals are a children's game. It isn't the only way.
It's assumed in the hypothetical. If the only way to get somebody to stop eating meat was to commit violence against them, what would you do?
I live in a real world where 2 trillion animals are dying.
Okay,
and
well,
me
do you
killing-
think
killing- and me becoming John Brown and launching an insurrection against the animal molesters and abusers, it's not going to happen. Nothing will happen because I don't have the backing. John Brown, by the way, was hanged when he tried to end slavery by
Great.
Harper's
So
Ferry.
I'm going to ask you again. If the only way to stop somebody from eating meat was to kill them, what would you do? Would you just let them eat meat?
I don't know, Richard. I don't actually know.
Okay,
because I'll never be in
well,
that
how about this?
situation.
How about this? The police are in these situations all the time. The only way to stop a suspect from murdering somebody is to murder them. Do you think the police should just let them commit murder?
The police are in a situation where, yes, sometimes they have to make tough decisions.
So
They're
you
always-
agree.
and
So
hold
you
on,
agree.
hold on.
So
And
you agree.
Police are not supposed to use lethal force almost ever.
I
They're
know.
supposed to always
I know.
try non-lethal force first.
I know, but you acknowledge that nonviolent action, nonviolence is not always.
Already acknowledged that violence is the last resort, and you're saying,
Right,
what about
right.
if it's the
So
first
if
resort?
violence
What if
was
it's
the
only
last
resort?
resort,
And it's just not.
so if violence was the last resort to getting somebody to stop eating meat, what would you do?
If violence were the last resort, well, we're not there yet. Maybe call me when the guillotines come out.
If
and I'll be there with
violence
you.
was the last resort, what would you do?
Call me when you bring the guillotines. I'll help you. I'll help you pull the lever.
If
But until
violence
that
was the
happens,
last resort, what would you do? Like you already acknowledge that you can't solve every situation with nonviolent means. There are means where you have exhausted every other option,
already
or
said that,
other
but
options aren't
you're trying
available to you.
You're trying
So
to get
again,
me to bite the bullet, saying
why-
that it's okay to kill carnies.
You are.
But no, it's
you are.
not.
By refusing to answer, you are saying you
Because
wouldn't
it's an
kill somebody
idiotic
to save
hypothetical
an
that has
animal.
no real world application. It's not real.
Look,
why do you
have such a trouble answering this question? If you've exhausted all other
Because it's
options,
ludicrous.
there's no other way to get people to stop eating meat. All other options have been exhausted. Would you kill somebody to stop them from killing another animal?
Maybe in if I were in Star Trek and I had
Well, what do you mean maybe? Maybe isn't an answer.
because you've entered again into a Star Trek episode where, like, maybe if we've tried everything else, every single thing.
Okay, so
like,
can you name the trait that's lacking in animals that if lacking in a human being, you would be fine with letting the human being get murdered? Because when it comes to policing, when it comes to somebody who's murdering other people in the street, you're fine with a cop pulling out his gun and killing the person. But when it comes to an animal, it seems like you have a completely different
I'm
standard.
not okay with the cop simply pulling a gun out and killing somebody. I hope that the cop has tried, first of all, like most cops will try.
Right,
hey,
right. And
stop.
but
don't do that. Hey, I'll try to tase you first. They try to use other means.
But you
not have
answered
that.
very clearly and very quickly when I asked you if somebody was going out and murdering somebody else, would you be in favor of a cop using lethal force to stop them? You said yes. But when I ask you the same thing when it comes to animals,
I said, as a last resort,
you
sometimes it's
refuse to
necessary,
answer.
but that does not denote policy. You don't say because sometimes a cop has to use lethal force in rare occasions, that means it's okay to use lethal force. And that's where all of your hypotheticals end up. Well, you said it's okay. And you know what's fucked up? You know what's really fucked up is that because you enter into these types of debates, there are people saying Gaines says it's okay to kill spiders and lions and tigers. And so I go throughout my life killing insects and birds because you know what? Gaines says it was okay. That's what you.
Look,
this is why your fucked up hypotheticals get young people into these situations.
Yeah, well, guess what? There are roughly a trillion animals that are getting killed each year. There's roughly a trillion animals that are getting killed each year. I'm assuming far fewer than a trillion people get killed. But in situations where there's a mass shooting, or somebody's about to get stabbed, or some other atrocities happening, you seem to be fine with the police using lethal force to stop those tragedies. But when it comes to animals, you seem to have a much different standard.
I never said that.
You seem to have a much different standard when it comes to animals. So why would you be okay with a cop killing a 15-year-old kid with an AR-15 who's about to blow a bunch of other kids away at school? You're fine with them killing that kid, but you're not okay with somebody going out and killing a hunter or killing a butcher or killing somebody who's buying meat from a grocery store.
Human on human crime is a lot of times completely, we're all complicit in some way because of how we're all contributing to society. So a lot of times, even if you're 1% complicit, that's another good defense of like the to anti-death penalty, is because society kind of makes these psychopaths. We've kind of created these school shooters, haven't we? They didn't just come out of nowhere. We've built them. We've somehow engineered them, and there's lots of ideas about how we did that. But you're saying that that's the same as a tiger, and it simply is not.
Can you name the trait that's lacking? Yeah. So can you name the trait that's lacking in animals that if lacking in a human being, you would let the human being just go on a rampage and kill other human beings?
That is not what animals do. They do not go on rampages and kill.
I'm not talking about killing carnivorous animals. I'm talking about humans killing animals. So you would not use lethal force to stop a human from killing an animal. You would presumably use lethal force to stop a human from killing another animal. Look, so name the trait that's lacking in animals that if lacking in human beings, you would let me gather my thoughts. I'm trying to ask this in a concise way that makes sense. So yeah, again, you're not okay with intervening with lethal force when it comes to killing somebody to prevent them from killing an animal, but you would be okay with intervening to kill somebody who's about to kill somebody else. So name the trait that's lacking in animals that if lacking in a human being, you would not intervene with lethal force if they were to, be killing a human being.
I'll say again, I think that lethal force and all violence should be a last resort, and that I don't think
we can assume it's a last resort. We can assume it's a last resort.
And so, I mean, if it is the last resort, I don't see that there would be any difference really between stopping a crime right in front of me. But again, I would, with the caveat that
guess what? There's crimes happening right in front of you every single time you go to a grocery store. There's crimes happening.
It bothers me tremendously.
So why would you not be? Again, why would you not be in favor if you could, if it were practical? I know there's an issue with activism. There not being many vegans.
No, there's a bigger problem, is that billions of dollars are being spent into keeping people benighted and fooled into continuing to buy corpses that we know not only poisons their own bodies, but of course kills trillions of animals.
Have you ever seen
tricked?
Yeah, I understand. Have you ever seen?
And you're saying, let me go in there and kill them all for it.
Yeah. So have you ever seen the anime Death Note?
I've only seen, no, not really, little pieces.
Okay, so basically there's this magical notebook where if you write somebody's name in it, they die.
Yeah.
So if you had a death note and you saw people at the grocery store eating meat, and let's say you tried to intervene and you said, hey, veganism is great, you shouldn't kill animals, la-di-da, you go through the whole spiel, and they say, that's great, I'm still going to buy a steak. Would you write their name in a death note?
No, probably not. Probably not.
And now, let me ask you this. If there was somebody with an AR-15 who is about to enter a school, and you said, hey, you should put that gun down, you're going to make a bad decision, you don't want to do this, and they said, no, I'm still going to go into the AR-15 and shoot a bunch of people in the school, would you write their name in a death note?
I don't know. I think I might try to physically stop them or something. I don't think
Let's say, they have an AR-15, you can't.
I mean, again, we're talking about magic now, but I think that if I could write anyone's name in the death note, it would be all of the advertisers, the real fucking enemies, the ones that are advertising and tricking people into buying animals and tricking people into doing horrible.
You can write their names in the death note, but we're talking about isolated examples of
right, but you're talking about people who are tools and have been tricked into you're talking about someone who's mentally having a mental break, and I'm just gonna write their name and kill them. I don't know. I honestly
you'd
don't.
let the kid just enter the school and shoot a bunch of people.
No, I think I'd try to stop him in some way.
Well, you can't. They have an AR-15.
No other way to stop. There's no way you can do it. They have an AR-15. Maybe I got an AR-15, or I call the police, or I don't know. We've got other ways.
So you call the police and let them wait outside the building while they shoot up a bunch of kids in school. when you have a death note and you have the power to stop them right then and there.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I would write their name in the death note. I'm not sure. I probably would, just to stop.
So it's interesting. You say maybe in the human context, but then in the animal context, you say no.
About magic books, man. I don't fucking know, but I mean, like talking about magic books is a little.
It's funny you call yourself vegan, but then you give completely different standards when it comes to animals.
No, I don't. I mean, I'm against the commodification, and
you do.
Call yourself vegan, and you ride horses,
like
man.
You do give completely. I don't ride horses. You give completely different standards when it comes to animals. I asked you the same question in the animal context, and you said no, I wouldn't kill them. I asked you the same question in the human context. You either say yes or maybe.
No,
so you seem a lot more comfortable with protecting other human lives than you do with animal lives.
It's not a school shooter is not the same thing as someone buying a steak, man. It's not the same thing.
It is.
It isn't.
They're both committing murder.
They're very different types of murders. One has been tricked into thinking that it's his nutrients and he's in protein though and all this other bullshit. One has been tricked into thinking that he has to have this thing. Plus there's cultural shit and religious shit and all the stuff you already know about.
The same thing about the school shooter.
You might, and it's something that's again very different. They're very different scenarios. One's got a gun that's walking to a school, and one is buying.
Well, let's say a slaughterhouse. We can analogize it to a slaughterhouse worker. We can analogize it to a slaughterhouse worker.
If you want me to write someone's name in the death note, I think that I would probably write the people who are in charge of the fucking disgusting system that is fooling masses of people into committing crimes without their even knowing it, without them even fucking thinking about it. Like zombies.
People were killing animals. People were killing animals before. McDonald's advertisements. So, like again, we can analogize this to somebody working in a slaughterhouse. We could talk about somebody 100 years ago, on a family farm.
He can't get a job anywhere because no one else will hire him, and now he has to do this horrible job just so he doesn't starve. I mean, that's
what the Nazis. That's what the SS members said.
Right?
I was just doing my job. I was just doing my job.
That's true. And you know what? And you know, the ones we hanged were the ones in charge. We didn't hang the people who made the knobs for the gas chambers.
We absolutely did. They used the excuse that I was just following orders and we killed them. The people who are running people who are working at the concentration camps, the SS guards, they absolutely were hanged and sentenced to death. Yeah. They used the excuse that I was just following orders.
Yeah, a lot of them did that. They were just they said that all the way up to all the way up to the rope around their neck. They said that. That's true. And some of them even got away with it for some years. But some of them actually were just following orders. The ones picking up the shoes.
I don't care if they're just following orders. They're pieces of shit.
The banality of evil is something that is particularly frightening about that time in history, and it's something that I think is going on right now, which is why I think that your conversation with Raffaella was apt when you said comparing it to the Holocaust is right, and I think it's quite similar. But the people that you really want to kill when it comes to the Holocaust aren't the guy isn't the guy in the guard tower that's trying to stay alive for the war.
Again,
it's the guy.
We're talking about this from the victim's perspective. So if you had a death note and you went to a concentration camp and you were trying to convince the SS guards, hey, look, this is wrong. You shouldn't do it. These Jews are people. They're just following orders. Would you write their name in a death note to save those Jews?
Your question is whether or not do they have a choice to keep doing. Now, I would ask you, would you put the SS soldier? Would you put the SS soldier in the death note, or would you put Himmler in the death note?
I'd put them both.
Okay, well, so would I. Okay, I try to end the Holocaust.
Why wouldn't you put the people who are buying meat in the death note? Why wouldn't you put the slaughterhouse workers in the death note? Why wouldn't you put the McDonald's advertisers in the death note?
I think the motivations when it comes to the consumer is a lot different than what's going on with the people running the industry. If you wanted me to put people up in the top,
the motivations of the consumer is that I only care about myself. I don't care about animals. That's their motivation. Why should those people live and continue to murder animals? I don't see how you could justify keeping them alive when they're going to murder animals.
Because I have hope that I can change their minds and get them to stop.
Well, guess what? innocent people are going to be murdered before you
Yeah.
change their mind.
But in your hypothetical, you're saying there's no way to change their mind. But
Well,
I
there
have
could
faith
be.
that I can't. But I have seen people change their minds, and I
Yeah,
still have faith in humanity to change their minds.
so again,
That's why
I
do
have
actually.
had arguments with people where I do change their mind on the spot. Other
Yeah, me
people
too.
don't. Other people don't, but I
And you
know
say,
they're
"Shoot 'em."
going to commit murder. I know they're going to commit murder
You don't
by
know
the time
that.
they come to
But you
that
don't know that.
realization. So
But a lot of people
why
take
wouldn't you put
five,
their name in the
10
death note?
times. People are because people take a little time to get convinced.
Yeah, well,
Sometimes.
guess what? They're going to commit murder in the meantime. So why wouldn't you put their name in the death note?
Yeah, but are you putting them in the death note? Are you going out and killing humans? I don't think so. I mean, why not? Would you kill someone?
Yeah, so it's not productive. Unfortunately, there aren't enough vegans. If I were to go out and start killing people, I'd just be locked up in jail.
Then
It
why
would
are you
probably
demanding the
harm the
same of
vegan
me?
movement.
Why are you telling me to do it? Like Jesus, I'm out here
This is
trying
about
my fucking hardest.
values. Well,
But
this
again,
this is about
Richard,
values.
I'm a full-time activist who's dedicating my life to this now, going out every single day, doing something. I'm trying my fucking hardest to
And good
work
for you.
people.
And good for you. But I
Not
don't
good for
think
me.
you.
It's just that I'm fucking trying, man. And I think it's a better way of spending my time than thinking about who I would kill. I feel like we're all just playing fuck, marry, kill all day long, and it's not productive.
Look, I think when you start saying I would not be in favor of using lethal force to stop murderers, I think that is an admission that you don't care about animals as much as you care about human beings.
I would probably hurt someone to a degree the same as if I saw someone beating a dog or beating a human, I would probably intervene the same. That's not the same thing as Death Note.
You wouldn't.
Yes, I would.
Well, you clearly wouldn't. We just used the Death Note example, and you said no when it came to the people at the grocery store eating meat. You said maybe or yes when it came to, similar human atrocities.
Because again, killing people at the grocery store is not productive.
Well, we also talked about slaughterhouse workers. We talked about
we have they're entrenched in a system of oppression that what you're basically
say that about
doing
a school
is
shooter.
shining a light that we're in this horrible situation, and we all acknowledge that already. Huh?
You could say all the same things about a school shooter. They're in a system of oppression. They probably wouldn't have committed the school shooting if they were rich or had enough money or were liked or weren't bullied. Like you could make all these same excuses for anybody committing any tragedy.
School shooting would probably fall under some kind of crime of passion. It's a very different thing than, again, the banality of evil, like the Holocaust going on against animals. It's a very different thing. It's like, it is very, very different. I'm talking about trying to dismantle a whole system of oppression, and that's something that I'm taking efforts to do. Now, if, like I said, I say it all the time, I only half joking, that when I hear those wheels squeaking on the guillotines and you want to go to Elon Musk's house or Bill Gates's house or any of these people, let me know. I'll help you with the guillotine. But I don't see anyone fucking doing it. And unless you're gonna join me and go to the next Whole Foods and start mowing down fucking carnies, then I'm not going to be doing it either.
Well, look, if they served human meat at the grocery store, let's say it's Jewish meat or black people meat, would you be saying the same thing?
If they were serving human meat, I'd be fucking terrified and probably trying to escape and trying to figure out what the fuck I'm going to do for self-preservation.
If you had a death note, would you stop them?
Death note. Probably, I guess. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, sure. Death note.
You clearly, then, I mean, it's pretty clear that you don't have the same consideration.
Wait, who? The consumer? Are you talking about the consumer or the, I mean, I don't know. The consumer, I feel, is you still have hope to reach through outreach. You're like, well, you have to assume that you can't. The hypothetical rules that out, but that's ridiculous. We know that that's not the nature.
In the hypothetical, I gave you an opportunity to talk to them, and if they still say, well, that's nice and all, but I'm still going to buy meat. I'm still going to buy a human steak.
Sure, and your hypothetical, fine, string them up. But it's fun to talk about these hypotheticals. Sure, I mean, okay, fine, kill all the people that we can't reach. Okay, Richard, you got me. I'll bite the bullet. Kill all the humans that we can't reach who still continue eating animals. Kill all the people who continue to abuse animals.
Well,
sure.
Are you answering that honestly?
I mean, I think hypotheticals are kind of bullshit. So sort of, I'm just playing your game, man. I mean, like it's a,
Well, this is about values, and I think
it's about values, but you're not producing, man. You weren't out there, you weren't out there doing this shit. You're not out there fucking killing carnies. You're just saying it from a chair, saying I
well,
would
look,
if I could.
look, this is
And all of
like,
us can do that.
well, look, there's reasons why I don't go out and kill carnies.
Sure, but I would
I
if I
don't think
could.
it's
Sure,
I don't think it's like there's no way it's a practical solution to
but you're playing
ending the animal
purge,
holocaust.
man, and it's okay. Okay, fine. How legitimate could my answer be? Like this is why I don't like these dumb hypotheticals because they don't have real world applications. I'm looking for solutions, man. I think you are a smart person, and I'm not blowing smoke up your ass. I think you are pretty fucking smart, but rather than use your brain to fucking try to find solutions for this shit, you're playing Death Note, and I don't want to fucking play Death Note with you. I don't want to play Fuck, Marry, Kill. There's no more time. It's like organizing the fucking chairs in the Titanic.
Well, look,
organizing the chairs in the Titanic.
We agreed to debate whether or not it's ethical to kill carnivorous animals. That's how this whole debate started, and it looks like on principle you agree with me. The only thing you disagree with is whether or not we can practically apply it.
No, the thing I disagree with is calling it a vegan position.
It is a
my
vegan
main
position,
and
look,
problem.
like it sounds like you conceded on the principled position. It's just on the practical application. You don't think we could practically apply it, but it is absolutely fundamental to the vegan position because, again, I would define veganism as a logical extension of human rights. So
yeah,
again,
but it isn't just a logical extension of human rights. It's literally trying to end the commodification and objectification of animals by not using them or engaging.
That is a logical extension of human rights. We don't commodify human beings.
You could give all of human rights to animals. That'd be fine by me. I guess we could give all of human rights to animals because they only use a small percentage of them.
Yeah.
But really, it's about trying to change the mindset of human beings and their relationship to animals. It's not necessarily just about. I think
yes, but like the reason why I bring up these hypotheticals, the reason why I think it's a big deal to talk about killing carnivorous animals or killing carnis is, again, if we're going to say it's a logical extension of human rights, then we have to recognize animals as people too, and the only way we're going to grant them personhood is if we come to these conclusions.
I would say that the number one concern of veganism is the emancipation of animals from the enslavement of human beings.
Right.
This carnivore culling thing is not that. We are talking about the human relationship to animals, not animals to animals.
We have to grant them personhood, and if you don't come to these logical conclusions, I don't see how you can convince to give these animals personhood like human beings have personhood. And you're not going to give them these human rights if you don't come to these logical conclusions.
Personhood in the idea of at the very least negative rights when it comes to human encroachment on their lives. So they have their rights to liberty. Why you want to take away the lion's liberty versus the gazelle because you like gazelles more than lions? You want to
take away Nazis' liberty. You want to take away terrorist liberties. You want to take away criminals' liberties. These are things we do to human beings.
That we've done. Yes, human beings we do because you're talking about statecraft, fucking complicated shit of economic power struggles and all sorts of struggles for resources and racism and all this other shit that comes into being a human being. And that is not what's going on between a gazelle and a lion. And we could witness that and behold them immediately and realize that's not what's fucking happening. There's no persecution of the gazelle.
They don't have the same social structures we do. You're right. I agree. That doesn't mean what they're doing isn't all that dissimilar. They're still committing murder.
You're imposing human values and human understandings of our lives and imposing it on theirs.
Right.
And
we do that.
Modest proposal. And the modest proposal of veganism is to leave them the fuck alone. And what's happening right now is debate bros are saying, well, actually, let's fucking separate the whales from all the other fish in the sea.
If we're not going to leave Nazis alone, if we're not going to leave criminals alone, then I don't see why we shouldn't leave animals alone. If we're going to include them in our human rights code, then at least we should come to the logical conclusion that yes, if we had the power to, these animals should be eradicated.
You asked me what I take issue with. I said that is not a vegan issue. The vegan stance is very, very modest and clear. We do not enslave animals. That's fucking it. We don't commodify animals. The human position.
The only way you're going to protect them from that is to grant them the same rights as human beings.
It's the same negative rights as human beings, which is to be left alone by human beings, I guess. But I mean, we don't need to. They do not need to be given all of the rights. I don't really care if you give them all the rights or not, because the only thing I'm asking for is to stop using them in any way. Stop commodifying them, stop objectifying them, because they're individuals who long to be free.
The only way to do that is to grant them the same rights. And if you're going to grant them the same rights, you have to come to these logical conclusions that we do have to impose our moral values.
Not at all. The logical conclusion is merely that the one thing that an animal has ever wanted from us is to leave them alone. That's all an animal has ever asked from us.
All the Nazis asked, just leave us alone, let us enslave.
The Jews wanted to be left alone. Yeah. All they wanted to be was left alone because they were pushed out of fucking Israel by persecution, and they wanted to be left alone. But fuckers kept fucking with them. And now people keep fucking with them, and they keep on getting fucked with. And now when they're faced with an existential threat, now Israel becomes an existential threat to others. And now we have more of a fucked up situation because violence begets violence. So now we're back into just an escalation of violence.
Look,
back to veganism. Again, veganism is only that we do not enslave animals. You keep on saying it's a vegan position, and it isn't. And that is my major fucking problem. Play your fucking Godonkin experiments, man. Have fun. I'm not anti you having fun with
you conceded to all these
scenarios.
Hypotheticals. I don't know how you can say that when you conceded to all these hypotheticals.
Because your hypotheticals aren't fucking real world scenarios, man.
You agreed with the principle. You agreed with the principle, and now you're saying you disagree.
It was a vegan principle. I didn't say that has anything to do with my veganism. Being vegan is merely taking the stand against animal slavery. It's a person for the emancipation of animals from the enslavement of humans.
I don't really care if you're saying it has nothing to do with your vegan principles. You conceded to the principles.
I did not concede to the application of these things of killing carnivores.
You didn't concede to the application, but you conceded to the principle.
The way this all started is that I go to college campuses. I go places where people don't even know the word veganism sometimes. Right now, I'm in Arkansas doing outreach. I meet people that think Noah's Ark was real. And you know what? If they have heard about veganism, they've heard about people like you, people of your big following, people like you who have reached some level of notoriety. And what they know about you are these extreme positions that you're taking that they apply in their minds to real world scenarios like killing birds, spiders, or whatever, because Gaines said it was a vegan position, and it fucking isn't.
Okay, well, I'm not particularly concerned if people smush spiders in the corner of their room, but...
is it vegan?
I would say, yeah, it probably is.
See, I mean, what does that have to do with what does smushing spiders have to do with emancipating animals from the enslavement of humans?
Well, they're carnivorous animals, so they're going to kill other animals.
What does it have to do with ending the commodification of animals by humans?
Well, I don't think that's going to end the commodification, but I see that as a logically consistent. I see that as a logically consistent position. I don't think people smushing spiders is going to emancipate animals, but again,
exactly, it's not a vegan
position. If we're going to grant animals the same rights as human beings, then I think we are going to have to take these principled stances that carnivorous animals should be eradicated, that we should stop that sort of violence, and we should stop that violence when animals conduct it and when humans conduct it.
Again, in order to end violence, a little more violence. Add violence, and that will solve violence.
It worked when we defeated the Nazis. It's working right now with Israel invading Rafah with Hamas.
It didn't work, Richard. It didn't work.
Absolutely works. Every single conflict Israel has had with any other nation, it was resolved with armed conflict.
Did it end anti-Semitism?
No. But guess what?
It didn't work.
With overwhelming military force,
It didn't
the
work.
anti-Semite pieces of shit, they're not going to be able to do fuck all.
They keep on doing it every 10 years or so.
Well, we'll see. Hamas is getting eradicated. Look, Israel had issues with Egypt. Right now, they had issues with all their surrounding neighbors. Armed conflict ended it all. They had issues with Jordan. Armed conflict ended that. So, no, violence does not beget violence. Again, when you have people,
they haven't gone a year with. Somehow, there's never been a year of peace in the Middle East. And yet violence...
Peace, well, guess what? We're approaching more and more peace. It's gradually getting there.
War raging in the Middle East and in Europe. We've got saber rattling going on in Southeast Asia. We are not anywhere near we're not on the dawn of peace. We're at the dawn of war. It's a very scary situation we're in. We have Iran, Kim Jong-un, and fucking Putin all saying they're running nuclear drills. We are not at the dawn of peace.
Yeah, well, what'll stop them?
Why?
What will stop them is force.
Because we're having violent conflict.
No, what will stop those? What will stop tyrants is overwhelming force.
Tyrants are emboldened by violence.
No, they're not. No, they're not. Why do you think China? Why do you think China hasn't invaded Taiwan yet?
The only reason we're afraid of it right now.
Why do you think Putin specifically invaded Ukraine?
The only reason because of the second largest grain producer, and they have a giant oil pipeline.
Yeah, and they're also not a member of NATO.
Yeah, they have resources that they think they can.
Yeah, and they're not a member of NATO. So because they didn't have overwhelming military force, because Russia thought that they could overtake Ukraine. Yeah, they knew these tyrants knew that Ukraine would be an easy target because they wouldn't be able to respond with an appropriate military force. Again, you have this thing, violence begets violence. No, violence ends violence. If you have overwhelming military force, you are less likely to get fucked with. That's why Russia hasn't invaded Poland or any other NATO member. That's why China hasn't invaded Taiwan. That is what's stopping conflict.
Hitler took Paris. He took Paris. He won. He won France.
Yeah, the French, who were still using horse and cart buggies to move artillery pieces.
Yeah, so
their military was shit.
Hitler used violence to take over lots of Europe. Would you agree? He took over huge parts of it, right?
Yeah, European nations that didn't have the military force required to stop a tyrant.
And did that solve his problem? Did violence work out for Hitler, for the Nazis?
No, because again, good people stood up to him with again more violence. That's what
people.
Ended.
I mean, we fought a war. There were good guys and bad guys on both sides. You know, there was a lot of corruption and horrible things that happened on both sides. It was really bad. And in the end, Germany was decimated. His people were all dead.
Yeah,
all the people were dead.
Yeah, good.
And so do you think he was happy that he used violence to carry out and
guess what? There's always going to be evil people. There's always going to be people who want to fuck with other people. Violence and unless you respond with violent force, they're going to keep doing it. You know what?
Germany, the center of culture and technology at that time, used violence as a means to their ends. They used in order to accomplish their goals. They used violence. How did that end up for them?
How did it end up for the rest of the world?
They were all on their knees. They were all on their knees. The only ones that made it were us.
So, what are you what would you have recommended as a solution to Hitler?
I think
should we have listened to Gandhi and just thrown ourselves off of cliffs?
I don't think maybe Gandhi. I don't think that. Hitler used violence, and violence was what we used to fight him in self-defense. I suppose they would use as an example. That's what they used it for. They said it was self-defense. I mean, America was attacked before they got into the war. They didn't want to get involved. It wasn't some beautiful altruistic idea, right? They didn't just get involved when they saw people.
The Roosevelt, he wanted to get into the war.
FDR wanted to, but he needed Congress to support him, and that doesn't just happen. Yeah. You have to have a lot of reasons. So my point is that Hitler used violence. He was the first one, and then violence begat violence, and then violence was used against him. And all of his people
Violence
died.
did not beget violence. There was a fucking asshole who wanted to fuck with everybody else, and violence ended that conflict. You're always going to have tyrants. You're always going to have the rise of fascism, and the only way to prevent that is with violent force.
You are talking like a fascist, saying that violence is the way to accomplish your goals.
It is.
That's what fascists.
Sorry, how should World War II have been solved?
You're talking like Hitler.
How should World War II have been solved?
World War II shouldn't have happened because if Hitler didn't use violence...
Guess what would have stopped World War II? If they had fucking hung Hitler. The only reason World War II happened was because the German courts at the time were extremely
well, I think a lot of
they were
things
extremely accommodating to right-wing political figures at the time. They were extremely accommodating to right-wing political figures at the time. If Hitler was left-wing, they would have hung him. What would have prevented World War II is if they used fucking violence to cull an uprising.
Do you think that the Nazis using violence was a good idea?
No, obviously not. They were violating everybody's rights.
They used violence to accomplish their goals. Their idea was just a very strong line against a very strong eugenics idea. I mean, everyone was talking eugenics back in the 30s. They took it very seriously and took it to this nth degree that I think in 100 years, we're just going to look at everyone in the 30s eugenics was all the rage. And there was this one group that took it a little too far and they used violence in order to accomplish their eugenicist ideas.
They were violating everybody's rights. They were the ones in the wrong, but you have to use violence to take out the people who are in the wrong, who are violating the rights of others. How, like again, what would have been your solution to World War II?
Look at it from the other side. You keep on thinking.
What would have been your solution to Nazis? If Nazis, you're so against violence.
Exactly. Nazis were using violence, which is what begat violence and caused World War II.
Oh, okay. Everybody is just supposed to agree with you. Okay. So
no.
In order for this non-violence bullshit to work, everyone has to agree with you. Well, guess what? Not everybody agrees with you, so your stupid ideas don't work.
No, if you're the guy who uses violence, you're the fucking Nazi.
Yeah, and guess what? And guess what? There's always going to be fucking Nazis. There's always going to be violent people who are committing harm.
Who wants to go and kill carnivores.
You can call them You can call them bad. You can call them evil. You're not going to stop them. You are not going to stop them without violence. How are you going to stop violent people?
You want to start violent. You want to be a violent person. How are you
going to stop violent people? How would you have stopped the Nazis?
Look, man.
You're literally just saying, "Oh, I have a solution for everything. Everybody agree with me." That's literally what you're saying.
I'm saying that violence is what caused the whole fucking problem in the first place. They chose a violent path.
What is the solution
to that? And the world suffered.
What is the solution to that?
The world suffered.
What is the solution to that?
What's the solution to violence?
Yes, if Hitler comes to power, what is the solution to Hitler? Violence, a war.
Yeah, I mean, we ended up having to fight a really nasty war. Millions of people died.
Yes, and that was the only solution to stopping Hitler. You have to use violence to stop tyrants.
You are suggesting that violence is a perfectly acceptable way to accomplish your goals.
You agree with me. No, you agree with me. You just said we need systems of regulation to govern populations.
I agree that I've said many times that violence is always on the table to use as a last resort. It's always there, but that's not something that.
So then you agree with me. So then you agree with me. What are you talking about?
Not something that denotes policy. Your policy of saying that violence is a good thing to use in order to accomplish our goals, like with Culling Carnivores, that violence is a way to act proactively, solve problems. Well, that's what Hitler thought. That violence was a way to proactively solve problems.
If the German government were to have hung Hitler, World War II never would have happened.
Yeah, but they didn't, and so he used
Yeah,
violence.
right. They had your
and the
policy.
world had to respond with
Let's be
violence.
sympathetic to
And then
Hitler. You know, he has some
it's
good
not
points.
what
You know,
you're being sympathetic with Hitler because you are
no.
defending
The
his
German
position.
government was sympathetic
You're
with Hitler.
defending
They
his
were using
position.
your ideology. You know,
No,
we should just imprison him, and hopefully
that's
he
not my
changes his
ideology at
mind.
all. My
Yeah, it
ideology
is.
is not that violence doesn't exist. My ideology is that
Let me
violence
ask you this:
should
would you
not
have
be
hung
the
Hitler?
thing.
Would you have hung Hitler after he committed treason?
Yeah, probably. Yeah, sure. Of course.
Okay, so then you're in
Especially
favor of
knowing
violence. The end.
This is why you
Then you're in favor with
this is why
me.
you
What
fail
are
to
you arguing
comprehend
about? You
the
would have
basic
killed
idea.
Hitler. You just
This is
agreed
not-
violence was the right answer.
Violence is the right answer sometimes, but it's not the
Okay,
tool to use to carry
right.
out as a means to accomplish your immediate goals, which is what you're suggesting. This is how we got on this, is that you're saying that
You literally agreed with the
violence is an
hypotheticals I proposed
acceptable
with the Death Note.
tool.
You literally agreed with the hypotheticals I proposed with the Death Note. So I don't know what you're even talking about here.
You're saying that violence is a perfectly acceptable means to achieve your goals.
You agreed with me. You agreed with my hypothetical about the Death Note.
I said
agreed with me.
I agreed with your anime game, yeah, but you say that violence is perfectly acceptable as a first resort, perfectly acceptable as
no, I didn't say that. In the now you're changing history. I asked you if you were in a grocery store, you had the option to argue with somebody, debate them, try to convince their mind, and if you exhausted every other option, violence was the last resort. So no. You agreed with my hypothetical. I acknowledge that violence shouldn't always be the first resort. It should often be the last resort, but you agree with me.
Yeah, I played your game. It was kind of fun,
Well,
but I don't think it means anything when it comes to, again, what veganism is or how we'll dismantle the systems of oppression. I think that again, rather than come up with hypotheticals like this, I think that you could actually do something to help the plight of animals.
Well, look, principles matter, and I think you agree with the principles. And I think for the most part, we probably do agree with effective forms of activism for the most part.
Probably.
We probably do. And you know what? I think if you're doing talks at universities and outreach, I think that's a great thing. I think you acknowledging that the animal agriculture industry is a holocaust, that's another great thing. I think we agree on more things than we disagree. Even though this conversation, did get heated and everything. Look, if you're doing outreach and all that, then I respect what you do. So, I'm sorry things got heated. Like, no hard feelings.
No, I don't take anything personal like that, man. It's not at all. I disagree with a lot of people, and I still ask them out for lunch. I don't have those types of feelings about. I honestly have felt for a long time that animals, even if I disagree with a lot, like the Culling Carnivores thing, I've always thought it was just, my big problem with it, honestly, is that you keep calling it a vegan thing. But that's my big sticking point, because I think that people look up to you, Richard. And I don't think you understand sometimes. I think you mitigate your effect on people who really do follow you and kind of idolize you. And sometimes I watch your stuff and you're so funny. I get it. Other times I don't get it, but people really like your shit, man. And I think sometimes it's a little irresponsible, to be honest. But at the end of the day, animals don't have anyone speaking up for them, and you are. And people who are, even people I really disagree with, like fucking like Francione and shit, like there's people I really disagree with, but you know what? They're speaking up for animals, and God damn it, we need people to speak up for animals. Even if I don't agree with everything,
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. Well, if you're ever in Ottawa, we should grab a bite to eat.
Cage match?
Yeah, cage match too.
Cage match too? No, I don't want to do a cage match. Thanks, but no, I would love that. I'll maybe I'll be up in Ottawa sometimes. We'll grab lunch. Yeah, that would be. You never know. I might be up there someday.
We can ride in my sidecar.
Okay, sounds good. But I won't be riding a horse, man.
Yeah, for sure. Me neither. I don't ride.
Okay. Well, I appreciate you, man. Thank you so much for stopping by. I think your reach is really something to be admired, and I hope that you go out there and keep changing people's minds into veganism and stop harming animals.
Yeah, sure. You too. All
All
right,
right,
man.
man.
Take care.
Thanks for stopping by, man.
Yeah, no
Appreciate
problem.
you.
No problem. See ya.